Chapter 61, The Trap in the Beginning. Seeing this chaotic scene, Fang Linian's eyes twitched. He immediately felt a strong sense of crisis. In the previous world of 811, there was a complete system of government, order, and public security. Although all this shackles Fang Linian's behavior, it could also protect him. In an orderly society, as long as the rules are followed, there are no taboos. Even if you are familiar with the rules and find the loopholes in the rules, you can use the rules for your own use. However, in such a chaotic world, the prevailing rules were fists and bullets. At least in most areas. Suddenly, Fang Linian sneezed fiercely, and his body trembled uncontrollably. Only then did he feel a chill coming from his wet clothes. Fang Linian had read relevant information that shivering is actually a spontaneous protective measure of the human body. It can make the body's heating efficiency reach over 470% of normal conditions in a short time. However, this is actually not a good phenomenon. It meant that Fang Linian's body temperature was dropping at an alarming rate. Even if a normal person is in this state, it was very easy to cause a dangerous hypothermia, let alone Fang Linian was even a cancer patient. Fortunately, he had carefully observed the environment before. After confirming that the environment Fang Linian was in was not dangerous for the time being, he walked to the opposite road hurriedly with a shiver. He then found his next objective. What was Fang Linian looking for? It was the jeep that overturned because of running over the corpse at high speed. This car was driven by the previous man, and the deformed bonnet was still emitting white smoke. On the jeep car, Fang Linian first found a vague card. It should be the man who was taken away. The surface of the document was plasticized, and there was a logo of a clenched steel fist on the front. The picture of the man was below the logo. His name was written next to the picture, Carl's. Then, Fang Linian found a dirty and sturdy military backpack in the back seat. He opened it and found that there was quite a lot of stuff inside, including a bottle of hard liquor, a rope, a windproof lighter, 5 black chocolates that had simple packaging, and a few rough clothes. Obviously, Carl's had been prepared for his escape long ago. This military backpack contained the materials he had prepared in advance, but he did not expect to benefit Fang Linian in the end. Needless to say, Fang Linian immediately changed the wet clothes on his body, then he wiped off the water stains on his body and changed into the old clothes in the bag. The texture of the clothes was very rough, the style didn't look nice at all. There was also a smell of sweat, but at this time, he had no choice in order to survive. Not to mention that the clothes had the smell of sweat, even if they had been used to wipe the poop, he had to put them on too. After changing the clothes, Fang Linian unplugged the bottle of hard liquor and drank a big mouthful. He immediately felt like swallowing a line of fire, burning from the throat to the stomach. He didn't expect the hard liquor to be so violent. He only felt that his throat was itchy, and he coughed violently. An abnormal redness appeared on his cheeks. After this long-lost cough, Fang Linian also felt a little faint. When he recovered from it, he discovered that the cold feeling had disappeared. There was even a kind of slight heat that came from inside his body. However, he understood that this was only a heat due to the dilation of blood vessels temporarily caused by alcohol. It did not really mean that his body had sufficient heat. He took a piece of chocolate next to him and started chewing. Chocolate was very bitter, and there were a lot of astringent impurities in it. The taste was really bad. Fang Linian chews while spitting out residue with a disgusted face, but this thing was a high-calorie food. After eating it with a frown, there was a noticeable feeling of fullness immediately. At this time Fang Linian had discovered that the industrialized products in this world were very close to the 1960s and 1970s. They were rough, simple, easy to use. As for the taste and aesthetics, they were all ignored. After solving the imminent problem, Fang Linian continued to search for the vehicle. He found a self-made multifunctional Swiss Army knife and several magazines in the box of the CO Pilot, then he found a simple maintenance toolbox at the rear of the vehicle. After seeing this toolbox, Fang Linian was stunned. He stood in the cold rain for more than 10 seconds. Then, his eyes suddenly lit up. He. Since entering this world, the prompts given by the space have repeatedly emphasized danger, staying alive, etc., which is undoubtedly equivalent to a gradual psychological suggestion. The final hint is even more direct, escape or hide. However, these prompts are clearly misleading. This time in the joint trial, the status of the poor guys like us are the little white mouse. Space's attitude towards us is no different from the poor cockfighting, dogfighting, and cricket fighting. They want to choose an outstanding powerful person who doesn't only know how to hide, but knows how to survive. So. The hints given may be true, but they are actually guiding people astray. Especially the last hint, it is a good choice to escape or find a safe place to hide. This is the biggest trap at all. Because the two alternative answers it gives should be wrong, whether it is to escape or find a safe place to hide, what is waiting for you in the end is definitely a trap. Therefore, the best choice is actually not to choose. And the real best choice should be, offensive. The motorcycle monster that captured Carl's should be the Reaper robot. It was previously shot by Carl's, so it obviously suffered some damage which shows that its own defense is not high. It will still be threatened by firearms. Not only that, this thing also dragged Carl's away on the road. From the previous introduction of the world, the first priority for these Reapers is to catch humans alive, then it is to kill and take away the corpse. So, it will try its best to keep Carl's who was dragged by the net alive, which means that it will not leave too fast. As long as I hurry up, I have a good chance to catch up with it. However, my body is so weak that I can only live like a normal person. If my combat power is less than half of the ordinary people and the shotgun was taken away by Carl's, then... Thinking of this, Fang Linian immediately looked at the jeep with scorching eyes. I hope it is not badly damaged. Chapter 62, Clever Use of Title. Then Fang Linian found a small jack in the trunk without much effort, then he jacked the car back upright and began to inspect the engine. The toolbox he found had played a big role. In fact, it was not a coincidence that the small jack and the toolbox were found in the vehicle. It was determined by the special environment of the world. In such a chaotic world, there would be a danger at any time, so there were definitely not going to be gas stations and maintenance stations all over. Once the vehicle broke down, it could only be thoroughly overhauled by returning to a large human settlement. Therefore, driver must have basic maintenance abilities and could handle common faults. Otherwise, the vehicle had to be abandoned if it broke down. This would be a waste of financial resources, delay the time and put the passengers in a very dangerous situation. After a careful inspection, Fang Linian's brows began to frown. I know it won't be easy. When the vehicle crashed, it has already suffered a lot of damage. There are 3 parts that are completely unusable, and there are no replacement parts. This means, I have to craft it by hand, and I have to craft it in a short period of time. In terms of the current conditions, it is really difficult. Anyway, I will give it a try. Soon, Fang Linian began to try to process these materials with simple tools. He quickly crafted 2 parts, but he stuck at crafting the 3rd part. After processing for 5 minutes, he sighed and shook his head helplessly. There was a saying that a clever woman can hardly cook without rice. He used the best piece of material he could find, but the difficulty of processing this piece of work was several times that of the previous one. There were 2 processing difficulties that needed to be overcome, but when he tried to overcome the first difficulty, the part was immediately scrapped. At this time, he had clearly calculated that even if the part could be processed smoothly, it would take at least half an hour. After half an hour, the Reaper with Carl's could no longer be able to catch up. Staring at the remaining piece of material in front of him, Fang Linian took a deep breath. He was unwilling to stop, but he still felt chaotic and unable to calm down in his mind. Suddenly, he thought of his talent ability. Bullet time seemed to be able to put him into highly concentrated thinking. After doing the preparations, he activated the bullet time. At this moment, Fang Linian entered that wonderful state again as if the flow of time had slowed down. The sensitivity of the data was also amazing that the length, width, and height of the part in his hand could be accurate to millimeters. Everything around him was included in his mind. Under this circumstance, he only felt that his condition was really good enough, so he took the time to start cutting the part. He first dealt with the most difficult points, directly solving the 3 difficult points of this process. It was worth mentioning that at this time Fang Linian had discovered the best use of his talent, bullet time. Under normal circumstances, his MP value was 130 points, 110 plus 20, after he equipped the title of Scholar. After activating the talent in the full MP, the MP value would drop to 65 points, and his MP value would be burned at a rate of 13 points per second. After 5 seconds, he would have to pay the price of temporary trauma to his mind. In that case, he would suffer from the side effect of headache, but he could continue to persist until his mind was permanently damaged. He would directly leave the bullet time state. In other words, Fang Linian could only persist for 5 plus 4 equals 9 seconds, and the 10th second his mind would suffer permanent damage. However, if he didn't equip the scholar title and activated the talent with 110 MP, his MP would drop to 55 points, and his MP would be burned at a rate of 11 points per second. After bullet time was activated, although it was not possible to take MP potion and wear equipment, there was no restriction on switching titles. So there was a key operation at this time. Immediately after the burn starts, he switched to the title of scholar immediately. At this time, his MP could be increased from 55 points to 75 points, and the MP value was still burned at a rate of 11 points per second. In this way, Fang Linian would be able to persist for 7 plus 4 equals 11 seconds. There were extra 2 seconds of buffer time. Don't underestimate the extra 2 seconds. In the state of bullet time, Fang Linian would feel that time was slowing down. 2 seconds were like 10 seconds in his mind. Although his bodily response remained the same, he could use this slowed time to think calmly and make the most precise and accurate operations. In fact, Fang Linian only entered bullet time for 5 seconds. He looked at the part in his hand with a smile. Although there would be a series of operations such as grinding, cutting, polishing, etc., they were all unimportant steps. The two most difficult technical difficulties had been overcome. He knew that time was pressing at this time, so he started to replace the newly processed parts quickly. Then, he jumped into the jeep, started the engine and drove away. In the beginning, Fang Linian drove very slowly. He could only drive at a speed of less than 30 miles/hour. The reason was that the road was slippery and it was dark. The driving style of this car was quite different from that of his own world. After getting used to it, he started to speed up. After only a dozen minutes, he got off the winding road and went into a road that seemed to connect to the Yangfan city in the distance. Obviously, Carl's escaped from Yangfan city. Fang Linian also began to feel anxious at this time. Because coming here meant entering the battlefield. At any time, a reaper may emerge from the dark to chase him down. That was not a pleasant thing, and Fang Linian thought that his odds of escaping were high. 5 minutes. Fang Linian secretly set a time limit in his mind. As long as he didn't catch up with Carl's after 5 minutes, he would immediately turn around and leave. However, just when he had just made up his mind, he suddenly heard a gunshot from the front left. The gunshot was very unique, it was clearly a dull gunshot of the shotgun. After hearing the gunshot, Fang Linian was delighted immediately. Because he remembered clearly that when Carl's was captured, he was still holding the shotgun. So, he simply turned the steering wheel and drove into the side road. At the same time, he turned on the high beam and drove forward without any scruples. Chapter 63, Double Kill. When the vehicle was halfway through, the gunshot sounded again. This time, Fang Linian was able to more accurately capture the direction. It should be tens of meters to the left. It was just that the road ahead didn't lead to the place where the gunshot was. He simply didn't take the usual path, turned the steering wheel, slammed on the accelerator and drove toward the slope next to him. As soon as he drove up the slope, he could see a warehouse at the end of the road. The Reaper had black smoke on its body. It was obviously injured again by Carl's 2 previous shots. Carl's escaped from the net somehow. He was reloading bullet with his back facing Fang Linian. The Reaper was obviously angered at this time. On the strange metal monster's head, the red light in the eyes kept flickering again. Suddenly, a hunting fork was launched from the side with a chain attached to it. It pierced into Carl's abdomen. Carl screamed, dropped the shotgun, grabbed the hunting fork with both hands and trembled violently. At this time, Fang Linian was 20 meters away. Both parties looked over as they were attracted by the lights of the jeep. At this moment, Fang Linian hesitated for a moment because he, Carl's, and Reaper robots were in a straight line at this time. He had to make a somewhat dilemma decision at this time. If he wanted to avoid Carl's and hit Reaper, it would delay him for at least 3 seconds. The Reaper was very likely to get away. However, if he continued to accelerate, he would first run into Carl's. As a character who appeared in the beginning, he could guess without thinking that there would be a lot of clues and side missions on this guy. If he ran over Charles at this speed, he would be dead directly. Faced with such a dilemma, Fang Linian made a decision almost instantly. He stepped on the accelerator with a blank expression. He was stepping on it to the max. The engine of the Jeep suddenly made a series of hoarse roars, and its speed had soared to more than 6,000 RPM. The engine seemed like it would have a violent explosion in the next second. A thick burst of black smoke was emitted from the rear exhaust pipe. Even the tires began to spin idly on the slippery ground for several rounds, throwing a large amount of mud to the rear. Immediately afterward, the metal monster weighing almost 3 tons rushed out. It ran into Carl's without stopping and swallowed Charles under its wheels. Blood and flesh splashed everywhere. The jeep was sped up again as it rushed forward. Seeing this scene, the Reaper's eyes flashed continuously. Its tires were spinning at a high speed, emitting a lot of smoke and wanting to drift away. But at this time, there were a few sparks on the dented spots of its body, then black smokes were emitted with a crackling sound and red sparks. It was the injuries caused by Charles's shotgun. The Reaper wanted to maximize its CPU, which caused an internal short circuit. Not only that, the chain hunting fork shot by Reaper also greatly interfered with its actions at this time. The hunting fork stabbed Carl's body, and Carl's had been crushed on the bottom of the jeep. The chain was broken off as it was stretched too much. Reaper was rushed forward at an alarming speed, but it was too late. The jeep was charging like a mad cow, ruthlessly slamming into the Reaper. Then, the jeep slammed into the warehouse with Reaper at the front. The whole warehouse trembled, causing the sands and rocks on the roof to fall down. Luckily, the warehouse was still sturdy enough to not collapse immediately. When the impact occurred, Fang Linian also instinctively made a move to protect himself. He directly hugged his head with his right hand and curled up his body. His left hand also pulled the handle next to him, and his feet pressed hard on the floor of the vehicle. The reason why he wanted to do this was because he had discovered that there was no seat belt when inspecting the vehicle, let alone more high-end airbags. After the collision, Fang Linian suddenly lost his vision, then his head buzzed as if he was hit by a sledgehammer. His entire face was numb. It took a while before he recovered from the crash. He felt a terrible headache, and his face was obviously swollen. It should have hit the steering wheel firmly during the collision. Not only that, his nose and mouth were bleeding, his nose was broken and 2 teeth were knocked off. He shook his head and staggered out of the car. After taking a sip of hard liquor and baring his teeth with pain, he finally overcame the pain. Took a moment to relax. After carefully examining the data, he found that his poor 30 health points were lost by 8 points, only 22 remained. The first thing he did next was to look back to Carl's. Unfortunately, Mr. Carl's did not survive the previous car crash. Although he had stopped breathing, he still widened his eyes with anger. Fang Linian could only shrug his shoulders to express regret. He had already thought very clearly before making a decision. If he chose to turn to avoid, then Reaper's chance of running away was as high as 80%. For Fang Linian, who lacked follow-up attack methods, once Reaper avoided his crash, the following situation would be very dangerous. He and the seriously injured Carls had at least a 50% chance of death. If you didn't evade, then the success rate of the crash was more than 80%. Obviously, Fang Linian played it safe instead of trying to maximize his profits. At this time, he was like a gambler with only the last bargaining chip left. He did not have any capital to take a risk. After stepping over Mr. Carl's blood-stained body, Fang Linian carefully searched around and found the shotgun in the pile of debris. After acquiring the shotgun, a series of prompts appeared on his retinas. Contractor ZB419, you are currently in a joint trial. All contractors participating in the trial will get a temporary insight state. In the insight state, some valuable equipment and items you get will be directly in the appraisal state. In this state, most of the attributes of items and equipment will be displayed. Of course, it does not rule out the possibility that some high-level items cannot be appraised. Chapter 64, Weapon obtained. Winchester M1887 Shotgun, Condition, Excellent. Place of Origin, Mexico Dole Company. Equipment Rarity, Blue, Improved. Equipment Slot, Hand, Weapon. Short Range, within 6 meters, Attack Power, 3258. Long Range, beyond 6 meters, Attack Power, 1221. Material, Steel, Plastic, Wood. Modifier Slot 1, used installed with SSK module. After installing this module, the projectile will be given extra kinetic energy when firing, which increases additional 17% damage to machine enemies. This damage has a minimum damage of 3 points. Modifier Slot, not used. Usable ammunition, the military and police departments. Bullet effective range, 40 meters. Weight, 3.9 kilograms. The length of the gun is 822 millimeters. Fire rate, very slow, lever action firing. After each shot, it must be loaded before it can be fired again. Required conditions: strength value must reach 6 points. Shotgun special effect: attacking an enemy at close range has a chance to knock the target into the air. The bullet's power will be weakened at 20 meters away. Shotgun special effect: attacking an enemy at close range has a chance to stun the target for 3 to 5 seconds and reduce movement speed and attack speed by 50%. Evaluation: try to find a suitable add-on module for its vacant modifier slot. This will make this gun reborn and increase your chances of surviving. The quality and rarity of the equipment will be shown by its color. The order is: gray, almost useless; white, regular equipment, no additional attributes; blue, enchanted equipment, with up to 2 enchanted attributes; black, have at least 1 buff attribute, but there will often be a negative special effect. Silver story equipment, specific loot drops by special plot characters with a small probability. It has unique attributes: dark gold equipment / green equipment, set / light green equipment, enhanceable equipment, golden story equipment / legendary equipment, orange, artifact, purple. White equipment may also have additional features depending on the type of equipment, but this is a special effect of the equipment type, that is to say, as long as you use this type of gun, you will have this special effect. For example, all shotguns will have the above special effect, so it may appear that white high-level equipment is probably better than the dark blue equipment. Looking at this weapon, Fang Linian breathed a long sigh of relief. Since discovering that this gun can cause damage to Reaper, he knew that this thing should not be a common item. Now that he got this weapon, he was no longer a powerless weakling. At least, he had some means to fight back. Not only that, Fang Linian found that this weapon was stronger against the mechanical creatures. The main source of damage was the installed SSK module. The craziest part of this module was not the additional 17% damage, but the minimum damage of 3 points. The Winchester M1887 shotgun used the 12-gauge shotgun shell. Once it was fired, the shotgun shell would be scattered into 913 pieces of fragmented projectiles in a fan shape to the front. The lowest guaranteed damage that this thing did to mechanical creatures can reach 2739 points. But there was a big problem right now. Fang Linian's own strength was only 3 points, so he couldn't use this gun. Fortunately, he got 4 free attribute points in the previous 811 world. After hesitating for a while, he very simply put 3 points into strength and, increasing it to 6 points, which reached the prerequisite for using this shotgun. Fang Linian still retained the remaining 1 free attribute point. He already knew that this free attribute point was very valuable. Maybe there is certain equipment that he can't equip just because of that 1 point. Therefore, it would be better to keep it for the future. Next, Fang Linian found an ammunition belt on Carl's waist. There were more than a dozen 12-gauge shotgun shells on it. After successfully filling the shotgun with ammunition, Fang Linian cautiously tried a shot first. Then, he pointed the gun at the jeep while walking over. At this time, the front of this jeep had been completely deformed, even the water tank burst open. The mist of hot water boiled and diffused, obstructing the line of sight. It was vaguely visible that the Reaper in the motorcycle form was killed. The dead body leaned on the rear pillar motionlessly. There were sizzling electric sparks from time to time on the deformed car front. It seemed to have been completely destroyed. However, Fang Linian was a very cautious person. After walking to a place 3 meters away, he raised the muzzle and directly pulled the trigger, hitting the half of Reaper's body. As a result, the Reaper, that had been motionless, struggled frantically. It made a strange hissing sound which sounded like an overload of electricity and the vicious curse when a poisonous snake spat out its tongue. Under this circumstance, Fang Linian repeated the series of actions of reloading and firing. The air was filled with a pungent smell of gunpowder, which even caused his eyes to tear later. However, Fang Linian continued the 5th shot, then prompts appeared on his retinas finally. Your Winchester M1887 shotgun has caused 24 plus 22 damage to Reaper M, increased by the SSK module. You successfully killed Reaper M. Because you did not cause full damage to Reaper M, the drop value of Reaper M's loot will be reduced accordingly. You got a summoning key, blue, dot. This key is dropped by Reaper M. You can use this key to summon a loot box of the corresponding tier to obtain related items. After getting the key, Fang Linian also took a long breath. He put it into the storage space that came with the nightmare mark, but he didn't rush to open it. Because he caused a lot of noise here. Whether it was the sound of gunfire or the loud noise of vehicle impact, it was easy to spread to the nearby places, and the process of killing this Reaper M was quite long. It was difficult to determine whether this Reaper had sent out a distressed signal for help. So, staying here was very dangerous. He had to get away as soon as possible. After Fang Linian checked the vehicle and confirmed that it could not be repaired, he put on the backpack, searched the dead Carl's body again, and disappeared into a small path in the dark. After half an hour, Fang Linian came to an abandoned gas station with tired footsteps. This place should be built before the purge. In addition to the main body of the gas station, there was also a standard fast food restaurant, supermarket, motel, etc. Of course, at this time, only the ruins of these once prosperous buildings were left. The windows were only left with black window frames. The surviving people had already looted all the valuable things in them, leaving only the harsh wind passing through the windows. Chapter 65, Summoning Box. After coming here, Fang Linian didn't want to leave. After all, walking in the dark was also a very dangerous thing. Not to mention the common danger of tripping, people may also set traps on the road, and the previous introduction to the world background also mentioned mutated creatures due to radiation. Hell, Fang Linian was not willing to face even a mutated mouse in the dark, let alone a mutated creature. After a simple survey in the gas station, Fang Linian was pleasantly surprised to find that the abandoned underground oil storage next to him could be entered. Of course, there was no gasoline here. After he got in, he found it was dry, warm, and relatively hidden. There were still burnt ashes on the ground. Obviously, someone had stayed here for the night before. In this case, Fang Linian took a rest here. Before taking a break, he also made a few simple sound traps with the discarded scraps next to him, so that if something approached, he could get an early warning. After finishing all this, Fang Linian finally sat down against the wall next to him, feeling the soreness and fatigue from his limbs. At this time, he found the bottle of liquor again from the backpack and disinfect the wound on the forehead with it. At this time, he deeply realized why liquor was listed as a necessity in many survival manuals, because this thing could refresh and warm up the drinker. It could also be used to disinfect wounds. It was an excellent way to start a fire when the surrounding environment was bad. It could be called as an omnipotent liquid. After chewing another half of the chocolate, Fang Linian suddenly noticed something flashing under his retinas. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a prompt stating that he had already obtained a milestone. Out of curiosity, Fang Linian opened on the prompt. You have gotten the Winchester M1887 shotgun, which fulfills the conditions of the milestone. Big Fist is the truth, temporary. You got the temporary title, Stark's Blessing. While wearing this title, any damage you suffer from mechanical creatures will be reduced by 70%. However, the other damage you suffer will be doubled. This title is a temporary title and will disappear after a week or after leaving the world. It will take effect if any condition is met. After seeing this title, Fang Linian squinted. This title is undoubtedly a double-edged sword. If it is used properly, this title can be said to exist like an artifact. If it is used at the wrong timing, then using it is undoubtedly committing suicide. After studying this title, Fang Linian suddenly realized that he had almost completed another milestone, and that was Murderer. At this time, it showed that he had killed a human, then he would get this title by killing another person. The descriptions clearly stated that this title was enhanceable. Not only that, Fang Linian felt that he could complete another milestone, Time is my friend and money. As compared to the milestones in the 811 world, these milestones were outrageously simple. But then he thought about it carefully. The people selected in the joint trial are ordinary people whose the space doesn't want. If they don't give some rookie benefits, wouldn't they just let the people die for nothing? It will not be a test at all. Anyway, when he was free, Fang Linian took out the blue key dropped by Reaper M and summoned the treasure chest. The style of this treasure box was in the form of futuristic science fiction. It was bound by a few silver-white chains, and the shape was in the form of a password box. After opening it, Fang Linian found that the center of the box was a silver-white bead with a texture very similar to metal. It was introduced that it was a high-value rare alloy that could be sold directly to the space in exchange for common points. Fang Linian simply chose to sell it and immediately gained 1,400 common points. There was one thing left in the corner of the box. This thing looked like a part that was simply disassembled directly from Reaper M. It was its metal head that looked a little crappy. The name of the item was called the Scrap of Reaper M. The explanation given later was that this was the most valuable thing on Reaper M, and the aborigines of this world should be in great demand for this. It also had great research value. To be honest, Fang Linian was a little disappointed with the result because he was too weak at this time. What he needed the most now was something that could instantly increase his immediate combat power. Whatever he got after opening the box, whether it was common points or the scrap of Reaper M, was hard currency. It wouldn't help Fang Linian until he had something to exchange. Before entering the joint trial, he directly took the drug to force himself to sleep for 14 hours, so Fang Linian closed his eyes and took a nap for half an hour before feeling almost recovered. At this time, although he was exhausted, his mind was still strong. He started to try a bold idea that he thought of before, that was to make a voodoo doll. He wanted to test if he could use black magic blood spider in non-descend mode. After realizing that his spirit was as high as 11 points, Fang Linian felt like a boss with a huge amount of money, but he was in a dilemma that he could not find a place to spend the money. In the 811 world, the seemingly weak blood spider had brought considerable benefits to him. Without this skill, Fang Linian would not be able to find out the big secret behind all these, and he wouldn't be able to get enough lucrative benefits. If he could make it again, it could be regarded as a self-defense skill anyway, wasn't it? Unfortunately, Fang Linian's attempt ended in failure. The reason was very simple. After all, this black magic belonged to the category of the occult. Without the strange voodoo power, he couldn't even make a voodoo doll, let alone casting blood spider. After sighing disappointedly, Fang Linian realized that the sky outside was brightened up. After flexing his hands and feet, he tried to crawl out of the oil storage. After having the experience of being blinded by the dark last night, he suddenly felt happy walking in the faint morning light. After coming to the outside world, the first thing Fang Linian did was to find a nearby high ground to look at the situation before making any major decision. When he climbed up to the abandoned electric tower next to him, dawn had arrived. The visibility was excellent, and the weather was very good. The blue sky and white clouds were quite eye-catching. It was worth mentioning that the magnetic field of this world had changed drastically. He could see funnel-shaped spiral clouds everywhere in the sky, some were white, some were grey, which immediately filled the blue sky with a very fantastic atmosphere. The surrounding terrain of the abandoned electric tower was full of bare hills, gobi, rocks, and only a small amount of grey shrubs. This place was extremely desolate. But when he looked further away, he could see a long river called Dunwall River which seemed to flow from the horizon. It was shining a little bit in the sunlight. It passed by Yangfan City, and 100 meters away from the river bank had a lot of trees and plants growing vigorously, but the surface of all plants had a layer of grey in the green, which was depressing. Chapter 66, Into the City. After observing the surrounding natural environment, Fang Linian began to look at the battlefield from a distance. Soon, he noticed that the sound of gun explosions in the distance became sparse and scattered. Not only that, the mechanical creature side began to retreat from the battlefield. The first to leave was an all-terrain transport vehicle with a huge fence. It was filled with human beings captured alive, then those Reaper M were covering the retreat. Therefore, it seemed that the mechanical creature side had some lack of combat power and was taking the initiative to retreat, but in fact, their strength was much stronger than human beings. The reason for this was actually not difficult to guess because the purpose of the war by the mechanical creature side was not to exterminate humans, but to capture as many humans alive as possible at the least cost. For the mechanical creature side, what was most needed was the precious additives extracted from human hair and blood. As long as humans were alive, their hair and blood could actually be regarded as a renewable resource. Under this concept of warfare, fighting in the dark had inevitably become the optimal choice for the mechanical creature side. Darkness had minimal impact on mechanical creatures, but for humans whose main attack method was long-range firearms, it could reduce combat effectiveness by at least 30%. Even when the mechanical creature felt that the loss of human beings was too great, it was not uncommon for them to take the initiative to cease the war to let the humans have a breathing time to recuperate. Fang Linian was undoubtedly not an idiot, so he quickly understood the current situation of the battle. He was relieved. He packed up his things, then he walked toward Yangfan City. Of course, he didn't forget to carry the Winchester M1887 shotgun in his hand. In such troubled times, it was necessary to show self-protection abilities to avoid attracting those greedy people. It was obviously not Fang Linian's style to act rashly, so he stopped and watched along the way. Before, when he was on the mountain, he couldn't see the environment clearly. At this time when the daylight was clear and he could watch from a close range, he immediately noticed Yangfan City's outskirt defense work was very solid. Their core defensive methods were very unique. The core defensive buildings were octagonal bastions that resembled a tortoise shell. There were a large number of passes and passages inside the bastion which could greatly limit the movement speed of mechanical creatures. There were a large number of auxiliary fortifications, and there was even no shortage of primitive and powerful traps such as rockfall traps. This bastion was good in defense and offense, which was tough for the enemies. Since the first goal of mechanical creatures was to capture humans alive, they would not directly use weapons of mass destruction. Therefore, it was not difficult to imagine that invading the bastion would be very tough. The closer he was to the city, the more common the kind of reinforced concrete bastions were. Although many had been blown up or destroyed, the tragedy on the battlefield was also very eye-catching. The corpse was also a treasure for mechanical creatures. So, although blood was spilled everywhere, those shocking casualties couldn't be seen. As Fang Linian continued to advance, an apparently newly built line of defense appeared in front of him. At least 24 soldiers with real ammunition were guarding here. There was also a fixed M61 Vulcan behind them. This thing could launch a metal storm in just a few seconds, tearing everything in front to pieces. A flag was inserted to the ground in front of the defense line. This grey flag had burnt marks and bullet holes, but the logo of the clenched steel fist was still vivid. These soldiers seemed to be sitting together chatting, but their eyes were very insidious. The rest of the people came in and out of the defensive line at will. But when it was Fang Linian's turn to enter, a tall man of about 1.8 meters in front pressed his hand on the gun on his waist and said faintly, "I have never seen you before, why are you going in? Who are you?" When he talked, the rest of the people showed a look of well-trained. Although there were still some standing and sitting, their muscles under the combat uniform were tense. They would enter a combat state at any time. It was like a group of wild wolves lying on the ground and taking sunbath seemed to be careless, but once the prey appeared, they were immediately ready to hunt. Fortunately, Fang Linian had already a plan for this, so he raised his hand and said, "Hey, take it easy, I'm not hostile, I'm just a stray scavenger who passes by. I was sleeping on the mountain in the west last night, then I saw a jeep being chased wildly by a Reaper M, so I wanted to see if anyone could help. In the end, the person in the car tried his best to kill the monster, but when I went to treat him, his lower body was already like melted chocolate chip cookie ice cream. I found this ID on his body. Does anyone know him?" As Fang Linian said, he handed Carl's identity card up. After the guy who interrogated him took a look, he whistled and turned his head. "Wow, Hans, the thief who stole your baby has been found." A man in his 30s standing next to him immediately stood up. His body exuded a pungent smell of motor oil. Besides, there was a pistol with a shocking barrel diameter on his waist. "Really? Where is Carl's? Quickly tell me, Captain. I will do what I say this time. After catching him, I will use a wrench to smash his ball on the right." Seeing Hans gritted his teeth, the captain shrugged and said, "It's a pity that you can't do this anymore because according to what this scavenger said, after Carl stole your baby last night and escaped, he was unfortunately spotted by a Reaper M and died together. If I'm not mistaken, his body has been taken away by Reaper who was cleaning the battlefield. The ball that you want to smash is probably in the giant mixing furnace of the mechanical monster." After talking about this, the captain looked at Fang Linian and said, "Boy, let's make a deal. You tell me the location of the jeep that Carl's drove away. I'll let you in, but don't make trouble." Fang Linian said simply. "You walk down the road to the west. After about 6 kilometers, you will see a collapsed billboard on the side of the road. The billboard has words like 'This holiday we take no gift,' then there will be a small path 200 meters ahead. The end of the small path is an abandoned factory. The jeep is in the factory. I must first explain one thing, its damage is quite heavy." Chapter 67, Milestone. The captain nodded, then he approached Fang Linian, bent down and stared into his eyes and said seriously, "Boy, that's not a car. For Hans, it's his wife, lover, shooter, local slang, it meant the male in a homosexual relationship, caramel-flavored donuts, James Bond. He would go crazy without this car, so I want to give you a piece of advice, that is, don't play tricks. There are 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, and I, Lieutenant Lucan of the Iron Fist Brotherhood can find you every minute." Fang Linian shrugged and said, "I am an honest person, sir, everyone who knows me likes to call me an honest wrench." Lieutenant Lucan twitched his mouth, then he tilted his head and said, "Okay, Mr. Wrench, you can pass. dirty, messy, but full of vitality. This was the first impression Yangfan City gave Fang Linian. When he first entered here, he almost thought that he was in a slum in India. The building materials of the house were gasoline barrel walls, cut barbed wire and discarded rubber tires. There were still colorful clothes hanging in the air, and only a small amount of brick and concrete in the buildings. Of course, there were more traces left by the battle, so people everywhere were busy repairing them, trying to heal the wounds caused by the war. Obviously, there was a huge force managing here. The order in the entire Yangfan city was pretty good, almost no crimes such as smashing, looting, etc. had occurred. After getting into Yangfan city, Fang Linjian could clearly feel a strong and savage force hiding in this dry, dirty, and rough city. According to the news that Fang Linian heard, the source of this power was the Iron Fist Brotherhood. After the machine civilization retreated, it would often give mankind a period of respite. They would only come back more than a month later at the latest. Therefore, a temporary and false peace had temporarily bestowed in Yangfan city. Not only that, Fang Linian found that despite such a bad situation, the people here were not desperate, but there was a peculiar vitality shining in their bodies. How to say, just like the worker ants dominated by the queen. They worked silently and selflessly. No matter how bad the environment was, they would work hard. But at this time Fang Linian had no time to delve into these secrets. His first priority at this time was how to get the remaining 600 common points because he felt that he could still try to complete another milestone, time is my friend and money. At this point, he had obtained 1400 common points and there were 35 minutes away from 6 hours. So, he just had to get the remaining 600 common points in the remaining time. According to Fang Linian's previous experience, the benefits he got were proportional to the risks and difficulty. The difficulty of completing the time is my friend and money was not easy, so the title that could be obtained must be quite practical. Therefore, he was also nervously looking for a store that could sell things. Although it was impossible to get common points directly in the aboriginal stores, it was possible to exchange some valuable items from the shop with what he had now, then he would sell the valuable item to the space. Therefore, after Fang Linian inquired about it, he went directly to the front of a 2-story building. The outside of this building was also in dilapidated condition. It was made of grey stones and yellow soil. It looked almost like a toilet. There was a mechanical steel arm hung at the door swayed slightly like a signboard. Above the mechanical arm, the words Bison Stamping Workshop were scribbled. Fang Linian was careful. After walking a few steps to the side, he found that the side of the store was directly remodeled with the carriage of an old double-decker bus. There was also a camouflaged warning device with a diameter of more than 3 meters on the roof, which was constantly rotating. When it was rotating, it was silent, showing the precision of its craftsmanship. Fang Linian opened the grass curtain at the door and walked in. The first thing he smelled was the familiar smell of engine oil. After getting used to the light inside, he saw a large iron counter in front. A bearded man with a naked upper body and a leather apron snorted. "Boy, we don't have what you want here. Get out of here. Also, put your hands and feet clean, if you don't want to go out with your limping legs and crying nose." Fang Linian sighed, walked forward, and threw the backpack behind him on the iron counter. Of course, the rest of the items were put into the storage space. He raised his chin. "These are what I brought, take a look." The bearded man looked at Fang Linian's tattered clothes with disdain, and he sneered with his smoky yellow teeth. "Boy, we don't accept waste here." Fang Linian gave him a deep look. "You will regret this." After speaking, he picked up his backpack and walked out. The bearded man snorted contemptuously, dug his nostrils, and smoothly pasted the sticky yellow unidentified object on the side table. "I regret? He ha 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 ha, are you kidding me?" Then he yawned and fell asleep directly on the counter. For a long time, someone pushed the bearded man. He shoved the hand impatiently, then he continued to sleep, but the next second I felt a sharp pain on the top of his head. He suddenly jumped up and shouted in pain, only then he knew that someone directly poured a glass of boiling water on his head. He was about to yell at the person, but he immediately held it back because he saw an old black man with a small dirty braid staring over him viciously. The old black man was full of momentum, and a mechanical arm was installed on his broken left arm. The old black man roared. "Athos! You idiot, what did you do?" Athos said in a daze. "Ah! Sir Gaiji, what did I do? I didn't do anything." The old black man smiled in anger. Then why is the kid at the door resolutely refusing to sell us things? Claiming that our bison's vision is so bad that we are not qualified to buy his things? Did you do something? The Bistaff Arms store next door are already watching us making a fool out of ourselves. Ados was also angry when he heard it. Their bison stamping workshop had been open for more than 10 years. Some people say they were aggressive, some say they are arrogant, some say they are a bunch of lunatics. They didn't care about this word of mouth at all, they treated them as a compliment. However, some people say that they had poor vision, that was really intolerable. This was to pour dirty water on their proudest place. He must reason it with the person. Therefore, Athos immediately rushed out like an angry bull, opened the door and roared. Who the hell is talking nonsense? Chapter 68, Scam. After Athos yelled, he saw the kid whom he chased out had set up a stall, and he looked at him with a taunting look. However, his eyes were soon attracted by the scrap on the stall. That scrap with pale silver light. He was dumbfounded at once. If Athos saw it correctly, this scrap turned out to be the scrap of the Reaper's complete main engine. This was very rare. Because although many Reaper robots were destroyed, the mechanical creature was implanted with a self-destruction program when it was manufactured. Once it encountered an extreme dire situation, the self-destruction program would be triggered and the chips and parts inside would be completely burned. Unless one could kill and happen to damage the self-destructing program chip part of the mechanical creature in one shot, otherwise it was impossible to get the complete main engine scrap. But there were a total of 3 self-destructing program chips, which were implanted in different places. If 3 chips were destroyed at one time, the probability of not affecting the main engine was too small, so there would mostly be 2 to 3 complete main engine scrap left after the war. Among the remains of Reaper's complete main engine, the chip could be disassembled and formatted for use in automatic machinery, and the disassembled high-precision parts were in short supply in anywhere of this world. If one was selling this in the market, he could ask for an infinite amount of benefits. Looking at Athos who rushed out at this time, Fang Linian said lightly. I asked you to see the goods I brought, what did you say? Then Fang Linian raised his shoulder bag smoothly. The cold sweat suddenly dripped from Athos' forehead, and he hoarsely said. Cut the crap, how much do you want? Fang Linian didn't seem to hear him. He just said. You said, we don't accept waste products here, so why would you ask me how much the waste products cost? Athos's face muscles kept beating, but he was slammed into the stomach by the old black man Gagey next to him. The pain immediately caused his whole body to fall to the ground and curled up. Gage stomped his face like stomping trash, then he spoke coldly at Fang Linian. Boy, enough. In the red house 300 meters behind you, you can find high-purity tequila and grilled iguana meat. If you are hungry, you can also have creamy potato soup and cold blood beer. Of course, there are also pretty girls with long legs and the silicone-filled dangling organs. Here are 5 platinum coins, which will let you have fun in there for at least a month. Fang Linian smiled and said to Gagey. Well, old man, I always restrain myself to not overdo things. I will forget about the past misunderstanding, but I don't want your platinum coin. You have to exchange it with item. Gagey squatted down and stroked the scrap of the main engine on the stall. The expression on his face was a bit intoxicated as if he was touching the girl's XXXX. He said after a while. No problem. Let's go in and talk. Fang Linian was re-invited to the bison stamping workshop as he said. The people around him booed disappointedly. Obviously, they felt that the end of the incident was so horribly disappointing. They were expecting it a fierce conflict. Have some fun for them. After re-entering the bison stamping workshop, Gagey took Fang Linian directly to the back and sat down. There were already a few people here, and it seemed that they were buyers who had been waiting here. After Gagey greeted these buyers, he whispered to Fang Linian. It just so happens that we have in-house sales. You want to exchange with item? No problem, just tell me what you like, but remember to be fast, otherwise, if others buy it first, there is nothing I can do. As he said, his mechanical hand knocked on the wall next to him, and immediately a blue electric spark flashed across. That wall slid open, revealing the weapon inside hanging on the wall. Immediately afterward, Athos, who had just been beaten, walked over from the side. Although there was still a bruise on his face, he still introduced the weapons. This is a 3-barreled revolver that we made by ourselves. It uses a special 25mm acid mercury bullet. The power is amazing. Even the mechanical creature has to be scared by it. Even if it fails to directly hit the target, the acid mercury fog emitted can also cause continuous air pollution in the area and interfere with the detection of mechanical creatures. After hearing the introduction, someone immediately shouted 3 platinum coins. Then, the price was raised to 5 platinum coins. The old black man Geiji whispered in Fang Linian's ear. Have you moved? My authority can still make the decision now. If you just nod your head, this gun will belong to you. If the price gets more than 10 platinum coins, then I can't help it. Fang Linian smiled and said. The ammunition for this weapon must be very expensive, and I must buy it from you, right? The corner of Gagi's eyes twitched. He stood up and walked away with a gloomy face. At this time, the 3-barreled revolver had been sold, and Ados had already pointed to the second weapon and said. This sturdy guy is called Baton. It has 2 injection systems and fuel systems, one on the left and one on the right. The attack mode can be switched at any time. When switching the incineration mode, the flame can reach 40 meters away, and the temperature exceeds 1700 degrees. When switching to the freezing mode, the mist can reach 70 degrees, which can freeze any creature in an instant. What's more, it weighs only 6.3 kilograms, it's only not more than 15 kilograms when the fuel is full. Then there was another round of bids. Everyone was eager to get it. After a while, the old black man with a dirty braid sat back next to Fang Linian, holding a bottle of cherry red beer in his hand. It seemed to be the local specialty cold blood beer. He took a sip and said. What do you think? This thing is specially made by us for hunting mutated poisonous stinger lizard. First, you use the incineration mode to force them out of the nest and you can burn away the poisonous thorns on their bodies, then you can activate the freezing mode to catch a mutated poisonous stinger lizard in 10 minutes. It can even still guarantee its freshness. The mutated stinger lizards on the market are very valuable. As long as you successfully hunt one, you will get the money back. Fang Linian stared for a while, then he suddenly said. According to your design, once it enters the operating state, the threshold voltage of the NMOS tube in the injection port circuit will soar above 70,000 volts. Such a small switch plays a very important role. If it is damaged, this thing is just a waste. Can I take a look at its specific technical parameters? Geiji coughed a few times as if choked by alcohol, then he stopped talking. Chapter 69, 3 kinds of components. Athos pointed to a gun again. This is our modified ray gun with very reliable abilities and great power. Geiji coughed and didn't speak. Fang Linian already said faintly. This guy who sells things is called Ados, right? This guy's arms are almost as thick as my waist. When such a burly guy like him picks up this gun, his palms will be shaking slightly. He can at most hold it for 2 to 3 seconds before putting it aside. Sir, this weapon that looks like a rifle has a weight that is not commensurate with its appearance. I think its true purpose should be in the fixed shooting position of the jeep, or you think I can easily aim it while running in the wild? Geiji's eyes looking at Fang Linian finally began to sharpen. Boy, I don't see that you are an expert. Say, what do you want? Fang Linian smiled and said. I'm in a hurry, so to make a long story short, I want to go to your material warehouse to see if there are any suitable items, then I want an enhancement component that can be added to the shotgun. Lastly, 12 shots of 12-gauge shotgun shells. Then, I have to remind with regret that thank you very much for your kindness, but I can only give you another 20 minutes to close the deal, then I have to try my luck elsewhere. Otherwise, my boss will take off my head and throw it into the microwave. You won't think that I can get the Reaper's main engine alone, right? Geiji's face changed a few times before saying. Okay. Geiji first asked someone to bring a box. Fang Linian opened it and saw that there were 12 12-gauge shotgun shells inside. This thing was obviously not valuable since he agreed to it so readily. Following Geiji through the corridor to the backyard, Fang Linian was surprised to find that there was a dilapidated elevator leading underground. Amidst the creaking noise, Fang Linian entered the elevator box and went underground. He immediately found that it was quite a spacious area. There were at least the size of 2 basketball courts. Most of them were occupied by arms workshops. Many people were busy, the rumbling sounds of machines were very loud, even his eardrums were buzzing. After passing a large pile of crates, the two came to the warehouse. The things inside were much neater than Fang Linian had imagined. Inside the warehouse were rows of waist-high wooden shelves on which were placed with the raw materials they collected from the destroyed mechanical creatures. After coming here, Fang Linian was joyful. Because, on his retinas, these raw materials should have been appraised by default. Most of which had no display text at all, indicating that these were worthless things. Only a small part of them was grey, which meant that there were only common things worth selling to the space. These were what Fang Linian wanted now. However, these grey common items were often sold at very low prices, ranging from a few common points to dozens of common points. A dozen pieces of raw materials could only be sold for less than 100 points. More importantly, would the treacherous old black man Geiji let Fang Linian take so much material? This was obviously impossible. Fang Linian shuttled among the shelves, and his eyes suddenly lit up. He suddenly saw that on the second row of the shelf next to him, there was a piece of white waste that could be sold at a high price of 700 common points. The above explanation was that the mutated data in this chipset had a certain research value. The so-called mutated data was actually a computer virus. For mechanical creatures, this thing was as big as a human disease. Fang Linian guessed that the mysterious and powerful space must be also using a lot of artificial intelligence technology, so this sample also had certain research significance for it. Only then it could be sold at 700 common points. So, Fang Linian contemplated for a while. He deliberately stayed in front of this shelf for 5 minutes, flipping stuffs over and over, then he looked at it reluctantly before shaking his head at Geiji. Where are the enhancement components? I want to see them. Geiji grabbed something similar to an iPad and fiddled with it a few times. There are 3 kinds of enhancement components that can be added to the shotgun. Look at it for yourself, but once the shotgun is installed with an enhancement component, there is no way to disassemble them. Forcibly disassembling them will damage the shotgun and component together. Fang Linian took it over and took a look. He found that the above description was very detailed. The first component was called the SDD component. The added part was the muzzle, which could extend the effective range of the shotgun by 20% and increase its power by 10%, but it had a drawback, which was doubling the reloading time. For example, the speed of reloading a bullet in 2 seconds will be delayed to 4 seconds. The second component was called the Thunderbolt component, which was installed in the magazine part. It could add electric current to the shot, causing an additional 50% damage to the mechanical creature. The disadvantage was that 7 more parts needed to be installed for the Thunderbolt component to be effective. It would increase the weapon weight by 10 kilograms. This was quite fatal. The last component was called the Shock Enhancement Module. This was especially for all shotguns' special effect. Attacking an enemy at close range had a chance to stun the target for 3 to 5 seconds and slow the target's attack speed by 60%. After installing this module, the 4th attack would inevitably trigger the special effect of the stun effect. After this special effect was triggered, it would enter a 10 seconds cooldown. However, the stun effect would have a 50% chance of being ignored by the mechanical creature. Even if it took effect, the duration would be halved. Looking at these 3 components, Fang Linian squinted. Obviously, the first component was the overall enhancement, the second component was built for fighting the mechanical creatures, the third component was obviously built for fighting the human beings. This kind of description was obviously very considerate. If the contestant felt that the mechanical creature was the biggest threat at the moment, he would choose the Thunderbolt component. If he felt that the threat was coming from his peers, then he would choose the third type. In case the contestant had difficulty in choosing, then choose the first type of overall enhancement. However, when Fang Linian faced such a comprehensive situation, he only hesitated for 2 seconds, and simply chose the Shock Enhancement Module. Because he had not yet seen the existence of the other contestants. According to his previous visual observations, the people involved in the joint trial by the giant light tentacles were at least 3 digits. Then, these 3 digits contestants were placed in the large environment of 100,000 people in Yangfan City like a drop into a bucket. But Fang Linian was very clear that the invisible threat was the most terrifying. Chapter 70, One-Time Title. Fang Linian raised his head and said to Geiji, I want the Shock Enhancement Module component, then let me choose 2 pieces of material in your warehouse and we can close the deal. A secret smile appeared on Geiji's face with dirty braid. Good. However, according to the regulations, we need to sign a contract first and then go to the city hall to file a transaction of more than 10 platinum coins. Otherwise, the tax officer of the Brotherhood, who has a better nose than a Caucasian hound, will come to my door for trouble at the first time. Fang Linian already knew at this time that the organization that ruled the city was called Iron Fist Brotherhood, so he nodded and said, Okay. Then Geiji took out the contract, Fang Linian looked at it, confirmed that it was a standard contract, and signed it. Geiji took out a button and clicked it. Someone came over with a camera with a microphone. There was a Steel Fist logo on the camera, and a hoarse voice came from the microphone. Geiji, you bastard finally has a business. Geiji snorted and said nothing, then he pointed the contract at the camera. After taking a few photos, the other party said okay. Such a complete monitoring mechanism really surprised Fang Linian. His evaluation of the Iron Fist Brotherhood was secretly increased. After the two returned to the warehouse, Fang Linian's expression suddenly changed because Athos had already stood at the door of the warehouse with a sneer. More importantly, all the things on the shelves in the warehouse had been changed. Geiji, the old black man, finally laughed triumphantly. Ha 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 ha, surprising, isn't it? Boy, you are indeed as cunning as a California sand fox. I can't be sure which thing you are interested in, but what I can be sure of is that you are interested in something, so I changed everything in the warehouse to Atos. Ha ha ha. Fang Linian said blankly. So, what do you want to say? Geiji shrugged and smiled triumphantly. If you still want to get what you want, then you have to add the chip. Although the shotgun you are carrying is worn and old, its condition is still good. You leave it, then give me 10 platinum coins, and we'll close the deal. Fang Linian squinted his eyes slightly and suddenly smiled. This smile really seemed to come from the heart, which immediately made Geiji had a feeling of very bad. Then Fang Linian said faintly. No, our contract is very clearly written. I just need to choose 2 pieces of materials in your warehouse, then the deal is considered done. Having said that, he walked up to Geiji, the old black man, stared at him face to face and said seriously. That contract has already been filed to the Brotherhood. Then, Fang Linian walked directly into the warehouse and picked up a piece of material with obvious purpose. This piece of material looks like metal waste, which was a mixed material that was twisted and intertwined after being melted at a high temperature. It was only the size of a fist. In fact, the materials that Athos rearranged at this time were considered to be relatively useless or they simply couldn't figure out what they were used for, but the two felt very uncomfortable seeing Fang Linian chose a material with intention. Then Fang Linian took another piece of material before saying to Geiji. Old man, give me the shock enhancement module component, and we'll close the deal. Geiji said with a sullen face. No. Fang Linian shrugged and said. If you don't have it, then never mind. Anyway, the contract has been put on record. I don't want to waste time here. I have to do what Lieutenant Lucan told me. Goodbye. Hearing the words Lieutenant Lucan, Geiji's face suddenly changed, and he immediately looked even more ugly. He said embarrassedly. Boy, this is not for me to make things difficult for you. The most critical core part of the shock enhancement module is the polycrystalline chip. This stuff has always been in short supply. There is no stock in our store. We can only get it when Brotherhood gave us the supply 2 days later, so you have to wait 2.5 days at the earliest. Fang Linian stared at Geiji for a while, then he suddenly smiled. Well, 2.5 days it is. After speaking, he turned and left. Seeing Fang Linian's back, Geiji's face was uncertain. Athos walked over and said viciously at this time. Boss, this kid is definitely an outsider, he must be bluffing. Don't listen to his nonsense. I will find some people to give him a lesson. We can't just let him be. Geiji, the greedy old man with a dirty braid, shook his head slightly and said. No, this is the end of this matter. Strictly speaking, we did not lose out on this single business. In this damn situation, it is better to not cause more troubles. After leaving the bison stamping workshop, Fang Linian put his hand into his backpack, held the piece of metal waste, and silently said in his mind. Sell this item. Fang Linian's common points once again increased by 1,200 points. It turned out that although Fang Linian seemed to be scammed and even he himself felt that he had lost the deal, his luck hadn't given up on him. His luck that was at the bottom seemed to start to rise. Or it can be said that Geiji, the treacherous old man, outsmarted himself. Among the junks he put up again after he emptied the warehouse, there was something shining with black light on the retina. After Fang Linian took it, the explanation given was. The material and cause of this item cannot be accurately determined at present, and it has a small amount of research value, so it is included in the Class D unknown object, and you can directly exchange it for 1200 common points or 1 merit point. In normal times, Fang Linian would definitely choose 1 merit point because rare thing was always worth it. Up to now, he had found several ways to get common points, but there was only one way to get merit point. It could only be obtained in the mission summary after completing the world, and it was even linked to performance. However, now was a special period. Fang Linian could only choose common points. The common points he held had increased to 4171 plus 1400 plus 1200 equals 6771 points. After entering this world, the newly acquired common points also soared to 2600 points, far exceeding the requirements of milestone, time is my friend and money. The point was, at this time, he entered this world for less than 6 hours. To be precise, it was 5 hours and 46 minutes. Therefore, Fang Linian got the prompt immediately. You got 2600 common points after 5 hours and 46 minutes into this world. You successfully achieved milestone, time is my friend and money. You got the one-time title, Black Market. Chapter 71, Bait. Title, Black Market, one time. Warning, once worn, this title cannot be removed, and it disappears after 50 minutes of wearing it. Prompt, after wearing this title, the position of the black market merchant in the world will be displayed on the retina, where you can use various circulating currencies or common points to purchase goods. Prompt, black market merchants will appear after 12 o'clock in the evening the day after tomorrow and stay for at least 8 hours. If the business is booming, they may stay longer. Prompt, black market merchants can be attacked, of course, they can also fight back. At the same time, in another grey-yellow circular building in Yangfan City, there were quite a few people gathered together. These people were working intensively with complicated faces. The four walls of the building were full of photos, intricate arrows, connecting lines, and a large amount of analytics written on the blackboard next to them. The person instructing these people to work was a woman in a grey dress and grey glasses. She looked like a village girl in the urban-rural fringe. She sat in front of the table, typed on the old typewriter and gave commands from time to time while looking at the information on the walls. This woman looked ordinary, but her eyes were extraordinarily bright as if she could see into the depths of people's hearts. She exuded a strong sense of confidence as if there was no problem that she couldn't solve in the world. Suddenly, a thin, pale man walked in from outside, grabbed a companion and whispered a few words, then he posted a photo on the blackboard next to him. This photo was not someone else, but Fang Linian. The photo was taken when he was signing a contract with the old black man Geiji. The pale man coughed, then took a cup of red liquid next to him and drank it in. He squinted and said, "It is almost certain that this guy dressed up as a scavenger is also a contestant. This mouse hides very deeply, but he still can't escape my eyes." However, a woman wearing a robe and cap immediately sneered. "Hee, blood slave, you idiot, do you really think this is your own ability? Without the convenience and shelter provided by Master Gai Qiushan, can you find someone here with peace of mind?" After hearing this, Blood Slave made a screaming noise from his throat. The canine teeth in his mouth bared out in an instant, his eyes suddenly turned red, his hair also stood up like an angry cat. He almost wanted to eat someone alive. He roared after a while. "Canvas! Don't think that you can simply humiliate me just because you get along with Master Gai Qiushan better. I tell you, I will tear out your throat to chew one day." The woman called Canvas smiled disdainfully and said, "I am waiting." After speaking, she turned and left, but when she left, she seemed to inadvertently make a gesture of slashing his throat with his finger. Blood Slave responded with a sneer, but the sneer immediately solidified on his face. Because the wall that Canvas slid with her finger had a neat cut, powder falling from it. Seeing this scene, the woman with grey-framed glasses held her hand on the frame indifferently, turning a blind eye to all this. Then, she gestured to the person next to her and pulled off the picture of Fang Linian on the blackboard and moved directly to another big blackboard. Above the big blackboard was written with one word, bait. On this blackboard, 8 photos had been densely pasted. Then, the woman in a grey dress turned her head and looked at another large blackboard. A bird's eye view of a warehouse was pinned on this blackboard. On the top right corner of the bird's eye view picture, there was a big red X. The red was very bright as if it was written with blood. There were 4 words below the picture. Clean. Gai Qiushan. The woman in a grey dress pondered for a moment, then she suddenly stood up and began to give orders. The people in the building immediately began to get busy. After the war, it seemed that the entire Yangfan city had fallen into a false peace, but even the ruler of the city, Iron Fist Brotherhood, did not expect that under this seemingly calm atmosphere, there were already many outsiders gathering, preparing for something. As the sun began to rise to the top of the sky, there was a bit of heat in the originally warm sunlight. The vendors everywhere on the street began to hide in the shade of the trees and in the eaves to avoid being dehydrated too fast. Fang Linian was queuing in front of the free water dispenser on the street. This was one of the public welfare facilities set up on the street by the Iron Fist Brotherhood, which could provide people passing by with clean water from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day. To be honest, Fang Linian didn't have much good impression of this kind of public welfare equipment, because, in his concept, this kind of facility was often vandalized by people. It was the same with derogatory terms such as dirty, tattered, inferior, etc. If it weren't because he had no money and was quite thirsty at this time, he wouldn't queue up no matter how. However, when it was really his turn, he was surprised to find that although the water purification device was old, it was cleaned. The damaged parts had been carefully repaired, and everyone could receive a disposable cup. This cup was very rough. It seemed to be woven from dry cactus or shrub fibers. A green plant leaf was put at the bottom of the cup to barely ensure that the water would not leak out, but it was enough to drink water. After drinking 6 cups of water, Fang Linian pulled out the green plant leaf in the cup and threw it in the garbage dump as shown by the arrow next to it, then he threw the disposable cup in his hand into the basket beside it. When the basket is full, it would be dragged to the side of the sun to expose it to the sun. It only took half an hour for the cup to be dry. This cheap and effective disinfection method was also ingenious. From the chatting of the people next to him, Fang Linian also learned why this public welfare facility was maintained so well. That was, Iron Fist Brotherhood had only prepared 2 penalties for those who destroyed these public welfare facilities. The punishment for a person with a heavier crime was to hang him directly on the shelf by the side. Such warning signs should be more persuasive than any propaganda slogans. The punishment for those with a lesser crime was to be brought to dig radiation mines for 6 months, then he had to compensate for the related repair and maintenance costs. If he didn't have money, it was okay. Continue to mine radiation mines. The daily reward was 10 copper coins. He had to dig until the money was enough for compensation. Sure enough, a strict rule is needed to rule such a chaotic world. Fang Linian sighed, then he honestly followed the dotted line on the road. Chapter 72, Bootlick. At this point, it seems that he still had many things to do. For example, there were still a few milestones that had not been completed, or try to get some local currency, or think a way to find clues for the hidden milestones, or find the whereabouts of other contestants. However, Fang Linian did not do these seemingly reasonable things, but turned and walked directly outside the city. Because in his mind, he had already determined what was the most urgent thing at present. In the face of this matter, the priority of everything must be automatically lowered by 1 level and be directly put aside. This matter was to Bootlick. Bootlick who? Of course, it was the actual ruler of the city, Iron Fist Brotherhood. Fang Linian came to this conclusion because he felt that when dealing with the cunning Geiji and Eidos at Bison Stamping Workshop, they were obviously intimidated after he mentioned the name of Lieutenant Lucan. Regarding the level of familiarity with Yangfan City, Geiji must be the clearest. An Iron Fist Brotherhood could terrify a local boss, so wasn't it obvious who should he Bootlick? The most important thing was that after Fang Linian made this idea, he immediately found a crucial entry point. With this entry point, he felt that he was very sure that he would have a relationship with Lieutenant Lucan. Even if it failed in the end, he believed that he would not leave a bad impression to the other party. Because of this, Fang Linian left behind so many complicated things and went straight out of the city. Of course, his destination was the West Gate guarded by Lieutenant Lucan and others. At this time, the sun was blazing, Lieutenant Lucan and others had come to the shade, but the place they stayed was still quite particular. There would always be a person in the most open place, not only that, but the rest were also separated in a group of 2 to 3. There wouldn't be an embarrassing accident of being all killed in one go. They were really well trained. Fang Linian, who was far away, saw Lieutenant Lucan. This guy was questioning another person who was about to enter the city, and he simply dismissed this person easily. Then, he saw Fang Linian as soon as he turned his head, and he beckoned to let the person pass. Fang Linian had prepared a series of words before, but he didn't expect that the other party would take the initiative to call him over. This was really a surprise. He immediately went up and said, "What's the matter?" "Sir," Lieutenant Lucan said very seriously. "Have you finished your business?" Fang Linian was stunned, then he smiled honestly. "It's finished, but I was forced to mention Captain's name when doing it. Then Fang Linian told Lieutenant Lucan what had happened before. He didn't hide or exaggerate anything. Lieutenant Lucan didn't react to it much, but he mentioned another topic suddenly. When you introduced yourself, you called yourself an honest wrench. Why did you have this nickname? Fang Linian's heart moved, and he secretly thought, here it comes. He had previously guessed that Yangfan City would be undergoing post-war reconstruction, so there should be a great demand for all kinds of skilled workers, so he spent a lot of effort in introducing himself. He wanted to seize every opportunity to present himself. Now it seemed that his effort was worth it. He smiled and said, "That's because I know a little about machine maintenance, and my friends will come to me if they encounter problems in this area, so over time they just gave me this nickname." Lieutenant Lucan's eyes flashed. He nodded and said, "Very good. It's a coincidence to say that you just told Geiji that guy said that I have something for you to work on. This is really accurate. I do have something to find you here." Fang Linian knew that this was a great opportunity to present himself, so he smiled humbly. "Sir, let me guess, is it related to that jeep? I just owed you a favor by reporting your name, so I came back here to see if there is anything I can help. After all, that jeep was hit hard, it is not easy to fix it." Lieutenant Lucan took a deep look at Fang Linian, and he was finally moved a little as he said, "Great, I like to deal with smart people like you. According to your previous information, Hans did find his baby, but the news he gave back made our team very passive because he said he needed 3 days to repair the car, but we need it for an operation at 9 p.m. tonight." After Lieutenant Lucan said this, a series of messages popped up on Fang Linian's retinas. "No. Contestant ZB419, congratulations for triggering the hidden mission, allies. Mission content, successfully complete Lieutenant Lucan's demands. Mission reward, unlock the reputation of Iron Fist Brotherhood. Mission hint, the higher Lieutenant Lucan's satisfaction after completing the mission, the higher the mission reward you will get. If you can surprise him, then he will give you a correspondingly rich return." Facing the unexpected hidden mission, Fang Linian seemed quite calm because he was mentally prepared when he came. He felt that this should be a good opportunity. The only thing that was different from what he predicted was that this time he actually got a hidden mission. The word hidden suddenly made Fang Linian think of one thing, that was, the hidden title mentioned by the system when he first entered the world. Is this a coincidence or is it a clue left on purpose? Ahem. Seeing that Fang Linian was distracted, Lieutenant Lucan was obviously a little unhappy. He took it for granted that Fang Linian wanted to back out after hearing the ins and outs of the matter, so he said with a sullen face, "I won't let you work for nothing. I heard that you ordered a shotgun module from Geiji. Although the goods there are not bad, it is impossible to compare with the internal materials of our Iron Fist Brotherhood. If you do it properly, I can get you a good one." Hearing Lieutenant Lucan's words, Fang Linian immediately recovered and smiled bitterly. No, sir, I don't mean it, but I haven't eaten yet, so I was just thinking of eating something somewhere, then I'll go help." Lieutenant Lucan gave Fang Linian a dubious look, then he walked to the side, kicked the guy who was asleep against the wall and said, "Dorga, get up. Your backpack is in the way. Give a portion of ration to Wrench, then bring him to find Hans in the garage." Dolga was a middle-aged man who didn't speak much. He looked decadent, vicissitudes and aging, and he was limping. He nodded silently, then stood up, took a box from the backpack and threw it to Fang Linian. He pointed at Fang Linian to motion him to follow him, then he led the way. Chapter 73, Problem. Fang Linian followed Dolga and found that he was limping a little while walking. Obviously, his left leg had been injured, but he was still moving quite quickly. Not only that, he always lowered his head slightly, and his waist was clearly bent. His walking posture seemed a bit ugly. But, these small details were all tactical moves that allowed him to evade immediately when he was attacked. It could be seen that he was a veteran with rich experience in war. After the two walked out more than a dozen steps, Dolga suddenly said, "You can eat while walking. If we get to the place, you probably won't have time to eat." Dolga's voice was hoarse, but there was a rare gentleness in it. After listening to Dolga's words, Fang Linian hurriedly opened the individual ration box in his hand and found that it was divided into 4 compartments. 3 of the compartments contained 3 kaki loaves, but there was a hole in the top of the bread. The bread was empty inside. This kind of bread is called teasage locally, and it could be kept for more than a month without being spoiled, and the other compartment contained meat strips similar to beef jerky. Seeing Fang Linian looking confused at the food in his hand, Dalga looked around. He came to a wild cactus next to him, took out the saber in his hand and cut off the sprouts on it. He cut off the top, sliced it into light green strips, put them on top of the teasage, filled the teasage with jerkies and handed it to Fang Linian. Fang Linian took a bite with a dubious mood. He found that although teasage was dry and hard, it had the crunchiness of a biscuit. After chewing a few more times, there was a slight aftertaste of sweetness and wheat. Then, he tasted the juiciness of the tender cactus and the slight bitterness. At last, the taste of the jerkies blended in, making it exceptionally delicious. He only ate 2 of this kind of teasage bread and felt a little full, then Dalga handed over a military water bottle. He gurgled up half of the water in it, and he immediately hiccuped twice. After the two walked out for about 1 kilometer, they saw a gate with soldiers in front. There were no signs around the gate, and the surrounding walls were towering. Only the steel fist flags flying beside it showed the particularity of this place. After reaching the gate, Dalga obviously knew the sentry at the gate. After chatting with this person for a few words, he directly waved to Fang Linian to let him pass. The two did not go through the gate, but entered from the back door of the nearby duty room. When Fang Linian walked in, he smelled a familiar smell of engine oil. In front of him was a very wide parking lot, almost the size of a football field, with a lot of vehicles parked inside. On both sides of the parking lot was a long row of large workshops that looked like a repair shop. There were 8 armored vehicles that were dismantled. Many people were busy around them. Fang Linian didn't even know some of this vehicle. Judging from the appearance, they resembled self-propelled artillery and missile launcher. Dalga cautiously led Fang Linian away from the parking lot, and he warned him in low voice. "Boy, if you don't want to get into trouble, then lower your damn head, look at the ground, and walk faster. Don't blame me for not warning you." The last guy looking around here ended up with a bullet in his head and got dragged out. Hearing Dalga's words, Fang Linian immediately lowered his head, then he followed him around into the trail behind. At the end of the trail, there was an iron gate. There was an old man with sharp eyes and hooked nose. When he just saw Dalga, he laughed loudly. "Dalga, you bastard, finally lose this time. Don't forget our bet, 4 cans of canned salmon, and it must be produced in the lake workshop. I have to admit that the jeep of your team was once a great guy, but it is done this time. Being scrapped is its only way." Dalga snorted coldly. "Old shack, your insight has never been accurate." The old man smiled until his eyes squinted. "Yes, my insight is not accurate, but Hans' insight is very accurate. He has been sitting there for 40 minutes with a crying face." Hearing this, Dalga's face changed. He walked quickly into the iron gate guarded by the old man. Fang Linian followed him and found that the venue was also very spacious, but the guards were very relaxed. Although there were a lot of vehicles here, most of them had rusted and deformed. This should be a scrapyard. The vehicles here were considered to be scrapped, so they of course wouldn't put much attention to it. Soon, Dalga found Hans in an open space in the scrapyard. He was sitting down on a rock next to him. The jeep parked next to him. Its appearance had been restored. To be precise, the components of the distorted roof cover had been replaced, but obviously, the problem lay in the interior of the vehicle. After seeing Dalga, Hans walked over with a frustrated face and said in pain. "Dalga, damn it, why did I drink last night? Never mind if I drank, why don't I sleep in the car? I gave that damn Carl's a chance. Oh no, you know what my feeling is right now? It is like watching my first love being dragged into the forest by several big guys while it was still shouting in despair. Even his sexy mustache has been deformed." Dalga frowned. "In trouble?" Hans sighed and said in pain. "Yes, very big trouble, the only thing we can do now is to wait." Dalga said. "Waiting for?" Hans said with a sad face. "Waiting for a new scrapped vehicle to come in, then we have to pray that the parts I need can be removed from the scrapped car." Hearing what Hans said, Dalga was speechless. He knew the current condition very well. It would be rare for a car to be sent into the scrapyard for at least 10 days, let alone removing the suitable parts from it. If this was the case, let alone fixing the car before 9 p.m., the repair would even take up 1 to 2 months. When the two were talking, they suddenly heard a loud noise next to them. Hans hurriedly turned his head, just in time to see Fang Linian remove the engine hood and threw it aside. Seeing this scene, Hans was so heartbroken that he suddenly yelled. "Hey, What are you doing? Fang Linian didn't answer at this time. He looked at the situation in the engine compartment, then he went to the bottom of the car again. Hans walked over angrily to stop all of this, but he didn't expect Fang Linian, who lay under the car, said. Give me a screwdriver. Although this car is seriously damaged, I think it can be rescued. At least, it will be fine for the mission at 9 p.m. What are you talking about? Hans could hardly believe his ears. How can that be? Fang Linian squinted at the bottom of the car and said without looking back. Mr. Hans, what you are confused about right now is the steering rod. I have also seen it. It suffered a terrible impact, and the power was even transmitted to the intake manifold next to it. Hans immediately said eagerly. Yes. Do you have a solution? Fang Linian said calmly. No. Hans roared. Then get the fuck out. Do you want to be as short as Juntu? Fang Linian said in astonishment. Is he short? Hans said. There have been thousands of such comments, even the fake will became real. Chapter 74. Seeing that Hans was about to go crazy, Fang Linian immediately said. But you seem to have fallen into a wrong direction. Hans stunned. What's wrong? Fang Linian said. What you think is how to repair it to a new look. What I'm thinking is how to get a car, even if it can move temporarily, it can still support the mission tonight. As for the other things, we will talk about it later. Hans was dumbfounded. Does this make a difference? Fang Linian said. Of course, there is a big difference. You see, if it is just used temporarily, we can change wire like this, then remove the coil on this side and directly connect the two. Although this will further reduce the shock-absorbing effect, this car doesn't seem to consider the comfort of passengers since its design, so it is not important. Hans was stunned for a while. He quickly understood Fang Linian's thinking, and he immediately yelled as if he had been stabbed. Ah, ah! If you do this, the vehicle will enter an overloaded state from the very beginning, and even if we can ride it back in the end, the air intake system and cooling system will no longer be usable after the engine is turned off. Fang Linian said. So in my plan, I will also install a simple water cooling device in the cooling system and the wheel hub, so that the vehicle can last for at least 2 hours. Water cooling. Hans wailed again. If you use water again, the brake discs will also be scrapped after driving back. Fang Linian got out from below and spread his hand. Honestly, yes. But what does that matter? Anyway, this car is still in a scrap state if it is parked here now. Hans couldn't argue with him for a while, but he still shook his head violently, using his action to express his opposition. Fang Linian spread out his hands to express helplessness, then he said to Dolga. So, I think I need someone who can make a final decision now. Dolga nodded. 20 minutes later, Lieutenant Lucan came here. He seemed to be in a hurry, and his vest was soaked with sweat. When Lieutenant Lucan came, he said simply. I have heard the general situation from Dolga. Wrench can make this car move before 9 p.m., right? And how long can it last? Fang Linian said. If the fuel is sufficient, 3 hours, and the speed cannot exceed 70 km per hour. More importantly, after driving back. Lieutenant Lucan said lightly. After driving back, the air intake system and the cooling system will be damaged, the brake discs are likely to be unusable, and the whole car will be scrap state. I have heard this from Dolga, but this is not the point. I care only whether you can do what you said before. Fang Linian took a deep breath. If I have 2 or 3 obedient helpers. Lieutenant Lucan said. No problem, Hans can help you. If you think he is not suitable, I can find someone else. Fang Linian glanced at Hans and said. Yes, I don't think Mr. Hans is suitable to help here, because I don't think he can be convinced when he disagrees, so please find a few honest and obedient people to come over. I still need some rewards to motivate them to work better. Lieutenant Lucan nodded and said. The people you want will be there in 20 minutes, and there is no problem with rewards. As he touched his waist, he took out 2 magazines and pulled his finger. The yellow bullets inside fell out. Lieutenant Lucan said. Here are 20 bullets. Every bullet is a hard currency on the market. You can get a meal in Yangfan City. It's impossible to eat well, but it's okay to fill stomach, which is enough for you to motivate them. Fang Linian nodded, looked at Lieutenant Lucan seriously and said. Then I have nothing to say. 4 hours later. Dusk had arrived. The flames on the horizon were burning the clouds brightly, burning the entire horizon very brilliantly, but the shadow of the evening had come quietly. Lieutenant Lucan, who was on duty at the outpost, had a sullen face and was kicking at a hapless person on the ground, completely ignoring the other party's screams. This guy was a smuggler. Usually, Lieutenant Lucan would turn a blind eye and let him pass, but unfortunately, an evil fire was burning in his heart even though his face looked very calm now. Because all the information he got at this time showed one thing, that was, his team should have been secretly set up. The other party inquired that there was a problem with his team's vehicle, so they deliberately did some dirty tricks secretly to slow them down. Lieutenant Lucan had looked for 3 captains to borrow a vehicle, but he was rejected by all of them. If the guy named Wrench is not reliable, it means that the mission tonight has to be carried out on foot. If this is the case, even if everything goes well, it will be difficult to rush back to turn in the mission immediately. What's more terrible is that the meteorological team also brought a bad news that there will probably be heavy rain tonight or tomorrow. In this case, the situation can only be described as dangerous. At this time, the roar of the engine suddenly came from a distance, and the people in the sentry post immediately became nervous. Although they knew that being attacked at this time was a small probability event, a mechanical creature disguised into a normal car and went in half a month ago. After being discovered, the mechanical creature had turned into a massacre mode. So, there was no way they wouldn't feel nervous. As a result, after the dust in the distance scattered, 3 modified sidecar armored motorcycles approached from afar. Each armored motorcycle carried 2 to 3 people. The tires and sidecars of these 3 motorcycles had obviously been modified and reinforced. They had the special rugged, durable, and practical style of this world. The first motorcycle had been rushing to the door of the sentry post before braking abruptly. A short man in a standard military uniform jumped down from above. His sleeve was rolled up, revealing the arm with a dark green tattoo. The man yelled at Lieutenant Lucan as soon as he jumped down. "Hey! Lucan, why are you still watching the door? Don't put all cats and dogs in. Look at your group of people, all of them are like refugees who have been hungry for 8 days. Remember to bark if you are in trouble. If we are in a good mood, we will come to help out." The man's tone was very presumptuous, and he actually treated Lieutenant Lucan as a watchdog. He laughed presumptuously after speaking. Lieutenant Lucan was obviously not good at words, and he said with a sullen face, "Chet! Get out of here! I don't want to see you!" Chapter 75, Shock and Surprise. Chet laughed loudly and walked to Lucan. "Why, unwilling? This time, we directly blew up a fuel transport team dispatched by Tip Han. Even the additional objectives of the combat mission were completed, and we got enough contribution points. Unlike you all who failed missions twice. It turned out that Iron Fist Brotherhood also has a very fierce competition mechanism between each individual team. The stronger the team's combat ability, the higher the military rank was, and the more resources and privileges would be obtained. The military rank had a fixed quota and would not be increased. Once a team fails to perform 3 consecutive missions, it would automatically be demoted and let the team behind replace it. Chet's Cheetah team had reached the promotion standard at this time, and it was waiting for Lieutenant Lucan's team to be demoted to make space for them. At this time, the 2 sides were of course displeased with each other. Because Lucan's team had failed 2 missions, when they chose the 3rd mission, they could only choose the mission with high difficulty and high points. At that time, they still had the Jeep. They felt that the chance to complete the mission was very high. They never expected Carls to steal the Jeep and scrapped it completely. Facing Chet's aggressiveness, Dalga, who was next to him, drew his gun with a sullen face, turned off the safety pin, and simply aimed at him. Chet's men were not rookies either. They also drew their guns. The 2 sides went into a confrontation mode at an instant. They would open fire at any moment. At this time, Chet walked in front of Lucan and said with a smile, "Why? You want to fight here? Hehe, I heard that the Jeep in your squad is spoiled, and it has been dragged into the scrapyard now. You can only execute the mission tonight on foot. Ahaha. That's 50 kilometers away. Well, Lucan, I'm a good-hearted person. I can't bear to watch you die. You give me half of your squad's supply quota this month, and I will borrow you 2 armored motorcycles, what do you think? Ha 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 ha. You have to think clearly. If you come to me later, then I will ask for 80% of the quota." Lucan's team almost burst into anger after hearing that. Asking for half of the supply quota was the same as asking them to starve next month. But it was exactly like Chet said, if the team had no vehicle, it would almost be the same as courting death. In this case, Lucan was also a man of tolerance. Although his hands were shaking slightly with anger, he was really considering the possibility of renting Chet's armored motorcycles. At this moment, a deep engine roar suddenly sounded in the distance. The sound spread far away. The glass of water was rippling because of it. At this time, everyone was attracted by the sound of the engine, and they all looked to the north. Soon, an amazing reinforced armored vehicle emerged from the corner. This car looked a bit cumbersome at first, and the sense of assembly was obvious when looking closely. There was actually a bulldozer bucket installed in the front. The entire design looked nondescript, but after a few more glances, there was a strange sense of power in it. Just like the modified car Monster Jam and the giant truck like Optimus Prime, they seemed to have several disproportionate structural parts, but it could give people enough visual impact and let people deeply appreciate the roughness of the machinery and the beauty of power. Seeing this armored vehicle approaching with a roar, the extra turret installed above had slowly rotated, and the muzzle had been locked. Whether it was Chet or Lieutenant Lucan, they were both tense as they drew their guns vigilantly. However, at this time, the cover of the turret suddenly opened. It was Hans who went to help out in the scrapyard after waiting for 2 unbearable hours. He laughed out loud. "Boss! What do you think of our new buddy?" Seeing Hans's face, Lieutenant Lucan was of course shocked first, then ecstatic thoughts surged into his mind. Where did this big guy come from? At this time, the rest of the team were also beaming in their eyes. They rushed up to check. These people were also veterans. The first thing they did was to check the thickness of the bulletproof steel plate in the carriage, then they were concerned about the tires. After discovering that it was far exceeding their expectations, they all began to ask the parameters of the vehicle in surprise. Faced with such a sudden condition, Chet, who was left by the side, was also shocked. To be honest, facing such a powerful armored vehicle that had been remodeled, he was also excited. He has already seen that the thickness of the bulletproof steel plate of the car's external body even reached 25 mm, which could greatly improve the safety of the occupants. Not only that, the tires of the vehicle were also equipped with parallel twin tires. It doubled the reliability of the vehicle. Originally, he felt that he did well in cutting costs to buy a few armored motorcycles by all means, but in front of this modified armored vehicle, his armored motorcycles were just like toys. They were completely crushed in terms of visual and actual power. A look of greed and desire appeared in his eyes. The first person to calm down was Lieutenant Lucan. He saw his men rushing to the side of the car and began to ask in excitement while Chet was watching sneakily beside. Lieutenant Lucan immediately shouted. He stepped forward and slapped his men in a row. "You piece of shit! Don't forget what we should do now. Return to your posts, otherwise I will let you taste my gun stock." After Lieutenant Lucan finished reprimanding, he walked straight to Chet and said without a spurious smile. "Lieutenant Chet, you have caused serious traffic congestion. My authority right now can question any suspicious person and ease the congestion. Now, please take your people and leave immediately. Otherwise, I have the right to detain your vehicle that caused the congestion. If you try to resist, then I will resort to force when necessary." Chet lost his composure. He still unwillingly looked a little at the huge armored vehicle that looked like a beast beside him, waved his hand dejectedly, and ordered his men. "Let's go." When Chet and his party left, Lieutenant Lucan let out a sigh of relief and hurried to ask Hans. It turned out that after Lieutenant Lucan left, Fang Linian was not in a hurry to repair the vehicle, but he carefully investigated all the scrapped vehicles in the scrapyard. Then, he proposed another plan, that was to treat the Jeep as a scrapped vehicle, disassemble all the useful parts above, and then switch to assembling a new car depending on the situation. Chapter 76, Satisfaction 110%. At this time, Fang Linian offered a completely new idea, then he directed the group to start. The old man guarding the door was actually a retired mechanic, and he was quite familiar with Dolga, so he was also watching by the side. This old man was actually as stubborn as Hans. After hearing what Fang Linian said, he initially tried his best to object, but as the work progressed, the old man realized that this path was feasible according to Fang Linian's skills. It was just that the people here all had very conservative thoughts. They were stuck on how to fix the Jeep, so they went straight into a dead end. After dismantling the Jeep and the other 6 scrapped vehicles, they created such a monster. This car was modified from the chassis of a VBC armored car, and the engine was a VC8 8-cylinder diesel engine with up to 1,240 horsepower. Where did this engine come from? It was exchanged from the people in the maintenance base with the 981A engine disassembled from the Jeep. Because 981A gasoline engines were more adaptable on the market, they were more expensive. The VC8 8-cylinder diesel engines were cheaper, so the other party also agreed very readily. The shovel in front of the vehicle was dismantled from an armored minesweeper in the scrapyard, and the protective external armor on the vehicle was disassembled from the other two armored personnel carriers. Of course, they also encountered a series of problems during assembly, but their behavior also attracted the curiosity of the onlooker engineers in the maintenance base. Therefore, several technical difficulties were discussed and resolved by everyone, so it was completed so fast. In the process of transformation, Fang Linian played the leader role at least 40%, so the others looked at him differently and did not hide their ideas when discussing. In this case, Fang Linian also found that the technology in this world, at least in terms of machine repair, was very deformed, such as welding and cutting technologies were at least 20 years ahead of the Earth he came from, but some technologies were 20 years behind. He really felt a little weird at first. Later, considering that this was a barren world after the war, human civilization, social structure, and social order collapsed rapidly in a short period of time. Human beings had become the vulnerable party, so this kind of uneven technologies were understandable. Of course, there was another possibility that a large organization such as Iron Fist Brotherhood artificially controlled a lot of black technology, but they did not spread it to the private sector. The reason might be lack of resources and inability to promote it on a large scale, or it could be possible that the Brotherhood was using it to maintain its regime. After Hans came, he took the initiative to help after being surprised. With the help of cutting and welding technology that had surpassed the Earth for 2 decades, the efficiency of vehicle modification is faster. During this process, Fang Linian had a clear understanding of Hans' skills. After all, he was a direct competitor. Fang Linian immediately realized that Hans was actually quite slow in thinking. The reason why he was able to repair the vehicle was entirely based on his experience as an apprentice. To put it simply, Hans had a lot of exposure to the common problems of vehicles when he was an apprentice. He was able to cope with it mechanically by memorizing, but if it were not a common failure, he would not change his idea at all and be lost in it. Of course, this modified car must also have many drawbacks, such as no comfort, high fuel consumption, probably more minor issues due to the lack of test drive, etc. However, one flaw cannot obscure the splendor of the Jade, its selling points were far greater than its drawbacks. So, when Fang Linian stood in front of Lieutenant Lucan, he got a prompt. Contestant ZB419, you successfully completed the hidden mission, Allies. Lieutenant Lucan is very satisfied with the answer sheet you handed in. Satisfaction, 110%. You will get extra rewards. You successfully unlocked the reputation of Iron Fist Brotherhood. You got an extra reward, Iron Fist Brotherhood reputation plus 400, your Iron Fist Brotherhood reputation at this time, 400/1000, friendly, ... You will get a bronze badge of Iron Fist Brotherhood which can prove that you are a friend of Iron Fist Brotherhood. You will get an additional reward, Shock Enhancement Module, Advanced. Fang Linian just finished reading the series of information jumping on his retinas, then he saw Lieutenant Lucan patted his shoulder with satisfaction. Nice job, Wrench. You complete your task better than I thought. At this time, another soldier wit had already walked over with a whistle and said with joy. Boss, do you see the expression on Chet's bitch face? It's a mixture of envy and jealousy. This is so refreshing. That damn guy is very good at playing tricks, so I decided to sleep in this big baby these few nights. If anyone dares to make trouble, I will let him taste the electric shock. As soon as Wit said that, Hans was already yelling. Wit, its name is Mammoth. Let me tell you another news. I have decided to live in it for a month, so your plan has to be postponed for at least 1 month. Wit, fuck you. Seeing his subordinates start to make jokes, the morale was obviously boosted. Lieutenant Lucan's gloomy face also showed a smile. I have already told Gagey that you don't want his shotgun shock enhancement module and let him refund 8 platinum coins to you. Keep them. As he said, he threw a bag to Fang Linian. Fang Linian took a look and found that it contained the common currency platinum coins. This thing looked only the size of a fingernail, but its material was not platinum at all. It was more like aluminum, but the patterns and writing on it were very clear and exquisite, which was difficult for ordinary people to counterfeit. Then Lieutenant Lucan looked at the time and said to Dolga. There are only 20 minutes before changing shift. I'll do something, you lead the team, okay? Dolga was originally the deputy captain, so he nodded and said. Okay, boss. Lieutenant Lucan looked at the modified mammoth car again and said thoughtfully. This kid can be considered as solving our urgent need. I remember we still have one more badge this year, right? Dolga was stunned, then he nodded and threw something over. Boy, you save us from walking 50 kilometers in the dark today, so, you are now my people. Fang Linian caught the thing and took a look. It turned out that it was a bronze badge. The surface of the badge also had a clenched steel fist. The back of the badge was carved with, Ad Victoriam, Invincible, followed by a line of small words. This badge is awarded to those who have shown kindness to the Great Iron Fist Brotherhood and made excellent contributions. Chapter 77, Exchange. Lieutenant Lucan said to Fang Linian. Follow me. Fang Linian followed Lieutenant Lucan and walked toward Yangfan City. Along the way, the two began to chat casually. Lieutenant Lucan was mainly probing, but Fang Linian's answers were perfect. Luckily, Lieutenant Lucan's focus was on whether he was a spy or not. As long as he was not, then the rest was not important. The two walked for about 20 minutes before they came to the core areas of Yangfan City. This was also the part of the fortress that Fang Linian had seen before. The powerful mechanical creature also had to be defeated with their swarm attacks when facing the sturdy defense of this fortress. At this time, Fang Linian saw it up close. It turned out that around the city wall where the fortress was built, there were 4 seemingly high-tech turrets. They looked like giant bells. The texture of the surface coating was closer to that of grey solar panels. Upon a closer look, there was even a texture even looked like an integrated circuit under the surface layer, forming a peculiar pattern. It looked completely mysterious and technological. According to Lieutenant Lucan's introduction, these turrets were actually defensive machines. Inside the Iron Fist Brotherhood, it was called Isha's Embrace. Isha was the legendary guardian goddess. When encountering a frontal bombardment, these 4 powerful machines would produce energy shields to resist attacks. This was also the most important reason why mechanical creatures couldn't breach into the fortress. However, even the Iron Fist Brotherhood itself could not master such black technology. The 4 Isha's Embrace were unearthed from a ruin. When the ruins were discovered, scientists within the Iron Fist Brotherhood even had a lot of disagreements. Some believed that the ruins should be a crashed alien spacecraft while others believed that it was a legacy of an ancient civilization. They were still arguing until now. Soon, the two came to the door of the fortress. After Lieutenant Lucan showed his credentials, he took Fang Linian through a long passage and entered the inner area of the Iron Fist Fortress. The guards here had been replaced by military policemen wearing standard uniforms, helmets, and black crosses on their arms. One could see that they were exceptionally elite by looking at their temperament and equipment. The defense inside was even tighter. Even Lieutenant Lucan had to show his dog tag. Fang Linian had to pin the bronze badge on his chest before he could enter. Even so, he was warned by the military police to move around in a very limited area, otherwise he would take the consequences. After the two walked through a corridor, they saw the nameplate in front of them with the words Merit Exchange Counter. After Lieutenant Lucan walked in, they heard a synthetic electronic voice. Please place your dog tag in the space in front and don't do anything extra, otherwise you will face the consequences. Lieutenant Lucan took the dog tag from his neck and placed it in the groove in front, and the synthetic electronic voice said. Lieutenant Lucan, your remaining contribution value is 87 points, you can perform the following options: 1. Exchange, 2. Query, 3. Exit. Lieutenant Lucan pressed the button 1, then he picked up the phone next to him. After it's connected, he said. I want to exchange for the shock enhancement module of the shotgun. The person on the phone said a few words, seemingly vaguely saying no. Out of stock. Fang Linian suddenly became anxious. However, Lieutenant Lucan still seemed to have his own way. He said a few more words to the phone. The other side added a few more words, and it seemed to be settled. Then Lieutenant Lucan asked Fang Linian. What model is your gun? Fang Linian hurriedly said. Winchester M1887 shotgun. Lieutenant Lucan replied in Yian, and soon there was a click sound like something appeared. A tray was slowly sent out by the side. A plastic bag was placed in the center of the tray. Lieutenant Lucan motioned Fang Linian to take it. After Fang Linian got it, he immediately got a prompt. You have obtained the Advanced Shock Enhancement Module, Special, which you can install on your Winchester M1887 shotgun. Warning: this module has a certain degree of abnormal mutation due to unstable voltage during manufacture. Once installed, it will give unknown enhancements to the weapon. This process is irreversible. Even if it is disassembled, it will be invalid. Please install it with caution. But please rest assured, there is a high probability that it will give a favorable buff, but there is also a possibility of a debuff. Facing the prompt at this time, Fang Linian was stunned. To be honest, if he had known that such a change would happen, he would rather choose the ordinary module from that damn Gagey because the enhancement of that thing was controllable. Fang Linian, as a control freak, hated such unplanned variables. But what could he do now at this time? Lieutenant Lucan had already said with a smile. Wrench, I'm a man of my words. The value of the mutated module is several times better than that of the ordinary module of Gagey. If you keep working hard for me, I will guarantee that you can get extra rewards beyond imagination. It was obvious that Lieutenant Lucan was recruiting Fang Linian. Fang Linian had finally unlocked the reputation of Iron Fist Brotherhood, so even without Lieutenant Lucan's recruit, he would keep following him. As such, they naturally hit it off. Fang Linian also knew what Lieutenant Lucan was most worried about at this time, so he took the initiative to ask, saying that he would definitely not be able to leave today, so he simply followed the team for the mission at night. Although his combat effectiveness was very weak, foreshadowing in advance to prevent Lieutenant Lucan from sending himself as cannon fodder to die, he still had some experience in maintenance. The mammoth was assembled with a completely new idea, so there would probably be some problems. If he went along with the mission, he could ease the pressure on Hans. Lieutenant Lucan saw Fang Linian being so sensible, and the gloomy expression on his face also eased a lot. He said that he had to do some preparations in the barrack, so he wouldn't bring Fang Linian with him. Lieutenant Lucan asked Fang Linian to stroll around in Yangfan City and gather at the sentry post at 9 p.m. If someone was giving him trouble or not letting him stay at the sentry post, he just had to show the bronze badge. After getting the token, Fang Linian and Lieutenant Lucan parted ways. He took this rare opportunity to wander around the restricted area inside the Iron Fist Fortress, only to realize that even Lieutenant Lucan and his men should only belong to the side branch of the Iron Fist Brotherhood. Just like the difference between the field army and the reserve in the army. Only those of the direct branch could enter the real core areas. After leaving the headquarters of the Iron Fist Brotherhood, Fang Linian thought for a while and decided to gamble his luck first. No matter what, he had to get a weapon to defend himself, so he found a place without anyone, took out the Advanced Shock Enhancement Module, Special, and installed it on the Winchester M1887 shotgun with a click. Chapter 78, Governor's Roar. Within a few seconds of the initial installation of the module, the gun did not have any reaction. Soon, Fang Linian felt that the surface of the firearm actually started to become hot, and there was a feeling of numbness like being electrocuted. The key was that the sky was already dark at this time, and people were looking over strangely from time to time. For the sake of safety, Fang Linian could only put the mutated gun directly into his personal space and let it transform on its own. After having a general understanding of Yangfan City at this time, Fang Linian felt that the pattern of this settlement was somewhat similar to that of the town during the Warring States period in Japan. With a strong defensive castle as the core, the surrounding was a bazaar/castle town with a strong commercial atmosphere. All the prosperity was built on the basis of force. Once the protection of force was gone, everything would vanish. Not only that, although this city built in the desert seemed rough, most of the building materials were stone. The first experience it gave people was the roughness of generosity, but some small delicate details could still be found. Such as every house had a pocket flower stand built with gravel. It was planted with tenacious cacti, sea buckthorn, zinnias, cornflowers, and so on. The walls were also engraved with wave patterns representing rebirth and fertility. Not only that, there were often special stone statues that were half a person tall at intersections in cities. The material of these statues was very special, it was a kind of black rock. It looked rough, but it felt very delicate. The shape of the statue had a human body and the head of a vulture. It looked fierce. It was the god of the desert worshipped by the Aborigines. Although the world's technology was also very advanced, the advent of the end and the despair of mankind were mixed, making religion spread easier. Every night, 3 white candles are lit in front of many desert gods. The white candles formed a triangle shape, then many people prayed in front of the statue. This had become a major feature of this city. After walking on the street for a while, Fang Linian felt a little hungry and wanted to eat some steaming food, so he came to a popular shop in the busy street. What attracted Fang Linian was the steamer-like cooking utensils placed at the entrance of this shop. It was steaming steamed cakes called pasa. It was made of a fermented mixture of chestnut, peanuts, rye, and flour. It had a fluffy taste and a slightly sweet and sour aftertaste. After eating 2 pasa, the roasted pigeon that Fang Linian ordered was also served. This dish was a local specialty. It had 2 characteristics. The first was the pigeon was not a pigeon, it was a large rodent that was good at running. It had strong reproductive power and a delicious taste because of the large amount of exercise. Secondly, although this dish was named roasted pigeon, it was actually a staple food. When the pigeon was slaughtered, its head was chopped off first, then a cut was made on its stomach to remove its internal organs. Lastly, its skin was stripped and the blood was rinsed. After that, chestnut rice, cactus fruit, flour, etc. would be made into pilaf and stuffed into the pigeon's stomach. After it was sprinkled with spices and wrapped in leaves, it was put into a special sealing soil pit to slowly roast with charcoal. In this way, the fat of the pigeon itself and the aroma of meat would eventually be simmered into the staple food inside. After serving, the meat of the pigeon on the outside tastes generally, but the pilaf inside was fragrant. It was very delicious. The boss would also give away a cucumber and a tomato. Biting the cucumber together with the pilaf was an extraordinary experience. Finally, Fang Linian ordered a bowl of hot milk tea and drank it. He immediately felt sweaty on his back and felt comfortable. The milk tea looked ordinary, but it was silky smooth. No wonder this shop was so popular. At this time, Fang Linian was full, so he ordered another milk tea and took some rest. At this time, he realized after paying the bill that the purchasing power of the platinum coin was quite amazing. He took out a platinum coin, and the boss even went to the next door to get some small change. If so, his 6 platinum coins could at least support him for a month. Just as Fang Linian was thinking about what to purchase next, he suddenly found that the Winchester M1887 shotgun in the storage space seemed to have been transformed. It was obviously shortened. Its specific attributes could be seen now. Governor's Roar. Type, Shotgun, Condition, Excellent. Place of Origin, Yangfan City. Equipment Rarity, Black. Equipment Slot, Hand, Weapon. Short Range, within 6 meters, Attack Power, 4470. Long Range, beyond 6 meters, Attack Power, 3050. Material, Steel, Plastic, Wood. Modifier Slot 1, Destroyed. There is a possibility of repair in the world of higher technology. Modifier Slot 2, Used Advanced Shock Enhancement Module, Special. Usable Ammunition, 12 mm shotgun. Weight, 3.9 kilograms. The length of the gun is 522 mm. Required conditions, the strength value must reach 6 points. Special effect, the user must use the special method of spin cock to reload in order to successfully fire. Special passive effect, attacking an enemy within a close range, 6 meters, has a 20% chance of knocking it back. Special passive effect, attacking an enemy at a close range, 8 meters, has a 70% chance of stunning the enemy for 4 seconds and reducing its movement speed by 60%. Special negative effect, Void, this weapon has a strong resentment. When you use it to attack, there is a certain chance that a certain piece of equipment on your body will be completely disabled, equivalent to an unworn state, until the end of the battle. Negative special effect, Short Mouth, in order to make this special weapon exert its maximum power, its mouth is sawed in half, resulting in its effective range much shorter than ordinary shotguns which are only 8 meters away. Normal shotgun's range is 2100 meters. Beyond this distance, the scattering rate of its shotgun will spread to an astonishing level that it is almost nullified. Evaluation, it still has room for further strengthening, provided that you have to find a way to fix it. Inscription, you can see the vague writing on the gun stock. If you can find the lucky pair of sunglasses, please put it with this gun. They are a natural pair. Looking at the description of this weapon, Fang Linian was finally relieved. The special effects of this weapon randomly transformed were quite good. It gave a huge surprise to Fang Linian, and it also made him more confident in his following plan. Chapter 79, First Encounter with Contestants. Then Fang Linian started shopping around. The goal was of course to buy some self-defense products. At this time, he had already thought very clearly that following Lieutenant Lucan and them to perform the mission at night had many benefits. For example, staying away from Yangfan City could avoid the attacks that other contestants may find. For example, having a backer made it difficult to be bullied by those treacherous local tyrants. Not only that, but it was also possible to obtain powerful equipment inside the Iron Fist Brotherhood. However, risks had always coexisted with benefits. Seeing that Lieutenant Lucan and the others treated this mission so seriously, it could be seen that there would be a huge risk in it. Although Fang Linian directly positioned himself as a harmless mechanic, he was still wearing the old clothes of the dead Carls at this time, which had zero protection. If the money couldn't be spent, it was no different from a scrap. So he simply started to choose those items that could save his life. After shopping for about 2 hours, there were only 3 platinum coins and some change left, but he had put on a standard mixed suit. This thing was made of steel wire, tough special plastics unique in this world, plant fibers, clothes, and other materials. It looked similar to the protective gear worn by rugby players. It didn't look artistic, but it was quite practical. Even a knife was hard to pierce through it. What made Fang Linian like it was that it also took into account the comfort. Pieces of furs were added to the inside lining. The frequent friction parts such as the joint had been taken care of, so the wearer's skin wouldn't be torn. After putting on this protective gear, Fang Linian realized that his defense had increased by 5 points, but his corresponding agility dropped by 1 point. When the boss sold it, he bragged so much that Fang Linian was very skeptical, but now it seemed to be true. After analyzing carefully, he found that this thing definitely couldn't defend from bullets, but in the dark, there were definitely more types of danger other than bullets. This suit was worth the money. Then Fang Linian went shopping again. In order to prevent sudden conditions, his list included high-calorie portable food such as liquor, dagger, drinking water, and chocolate. Although his private space was very packed full, these things were crucial at critical times. Just when Fang Linian was paying, he suddenly heard a hoarse cry from the street outside. After hearing clearly, he was shocked before hurriedly rushing to the door of the shop. It turned out that a brawny man on the street was grabbing a woman and dragging her by her hair very roughly. The woman was struggling, crying in pain, and even cursing stutteringly. It was her words that attracted Fang Linian. "Be bastard! Let go of me, you skew m. My dad is the boss in the Yao Ma Ti. He will chop you into pieces to make meatball and cook you." Obviously, most of the people who could yell out the 3 words Yao Ma Ti were contestants who came together. No wonder Fang Linian was interested. After Fang Linian went out, he discovered that there was also a man who was arrested with the woman. The man was obviously beaten up badly. His floral shirt was stained red with blood and dust. He was unable to stand. 2 men were carrying them. After the man and the woman were taken to the square at the intersection ahead, the man was quickly hung up. His hands and feet were nailed to the shelf standing in the center of the intersection. Next to him was the statue of the desert god. At this time, the man was naturally screaming in pain, but he just yelled a few times, and a man in the Iron Fist Brotherhood uniform attacked him abruptly. This person's attack speed was so fast that he didn't even see the process of drawing the blade from his waist. With a flash of cold light, the man who was being hung immediately screamed painfully. About 6 minutes later, his voice began to faint as he finally died. Fang Linian looked closer, and his facial muscles twitched. It turned out that the man's stomach was sliced open with the blade. His internal organs had already rolled out and scattered all over the place. The scene was extremely bloody. The onlookers around were obviously shocked and dispersed, but they came back again after a while. Obviously, no matter where they were, being onlookers were human nature. At this time, the man in uniform said loudly. After entering the city, this man and woman tried to steal the goods in Keiku's shop. After they were discovered, they also forcibly resisted. There were 3 minor injuries and 1 serious injury, but they were unable to compensate. According to the Scarlet Clause Article 3 and Article 7, one of them was executed in the downtown area, and the other will be sentenced to Keiku's shop as a slave to compensate for the loss of the shop. After the man in uniform finished speaking, he watched the surrounding atmosphere and found that many people around him showed shock and fear, and he nodded. Obviously, he was satisfied with the effect of this punishment. Then, he left directly. Seeing her companion being killed in such a tragic way, the contestant woman opened her mouth directly, even the lymph nodes in her throat could be seen. Obviously, the murder scene had a very deep impact on her. Her arrogance suddenly disappeared. "Since you can't pay for my loss, then you are my slave." A hoarse and strange voice came from nearby. When the woman turned around and looked, she immediately found that the greasy middle-aged shopkeeper had already walked over with a very peculiar evil expression on her face. He then tore her clothes apart. The woman screamed and resisted, but what was waiting for her was a slap in the face, then another slap for another scream. The louder she screamed, the heavier the slap, and then another slap in the face. The louder the call, the heavier the slap. The onlookers immediately whistled in excitement as if they were celebrating a carnival. Seeing this scene, Fang Linian took a deep breath and strode up. Righteously. Chapter 80, Sudden Interrogation. Next, Fang Linian found a hidden place and began to special practice the spincock reload of the governor's roar. At first, he failed many times, but he finally became more adept later. Seeing that it was almost time to meet up, Fang Linian came back to the sentry post. It was already dark at this time. Because mechanical creatures were used to launching raids at night, so the defense here was at least several times tighter than during the day. If Fang Linian didn't put the bronze badge on his chest in advance, he might have been interrogated with brute force by the patrol team. Even so, he also had to walk under the gun muzzles, which put him under a lot of pressure. The modified mammoth was just a few hundred meters away. His back broke in a cold sweat. After coming to the mammoth, the few team members who stayed behind also greeted Fang Linian one after another. They seemed to recognize him as a temporary squad mate. It should be Hans who taught them the importance of Fang Linian. After waiting for about 10 minutes, all the squad members had arrived, only waiting for Lieutenant Lucan. The members were a little surprised at this time because Lieutenant Lucan was a very punctual person. He was almost always the first to arrive and the last to go. He was rarely late. Fortunately, Dolga was very punctual at this time, which played the role of restraining them, lest these impetuous people caused some troubles. Time passed second by second. Suddenly, there was an engine sound in the distance, then a military jeep turned around the corner and drove over. Lieutenant Lucan was sitting on the CO driver's seat. It was a military police wearing a black cross armband sitting on the driver's seat. After the car parked in front of everyone, the military police jumped out of the car, saluted Lieutenant Lucan with a blank face, and then said faintly, "Captain, you have 5 minutes to move the items." Lieutenant Lucan nodded, then he yelled at his squad, "Hurry up and move the things." Fang Linian and the others went over and saw that there was a big oil barrel in the rear compartment of the jeep. It took 3 people to move it. When Fang Linian leaned over and smelled, it turned out to be diesel. Lieutenant Lucan went to get the fuel for this mammoth. After filling up mammoth, Lieutenant Lucan gave Fang Linian a deep glance, pointed to the side and said, "Go there." After speaking, he walked over there first. After Fang Linian heard these words, he was shocked. As he approached Lieutenant Lucan, he immediately smelled a pungent bloody smell in his nose. He took a closer look and found that Lieutenant Lucan's boots, pants, and legs were full of large patches of bloodstain. In this case, he also increased his vigilance and was ready to open his talent bullet time to run away at any time. After coming to the side, Lieutenant Lucan suddenly said, "I am a person who values the concept of time very much. I have been late twice in the past 5 years. One time, I got 3 shots in my abdomen and bled too much. Dolga carried me back, otherwise I would be dead." Having said that, he paused for a while. He suddenly reached into his jacket, seeming to draw his gun. Fang Linian almost reacted excessively, but fortunately, he immediately restrained his impulse, because the next thing Lieutenant Lucan took out was a cigarette. After lighting it up, he took a deep breath and said, "The second time is today's assembly. I was 22 minutes late. Do you know the reason I was late?" Fang Linian shook his head silently. He had already seen that Lieutenant Lucan was in an excited state. The accumulated pressure needed to be vented. At this time, he only needed to be a listener. "Sure enough," Lieutenant Lucan continued. "Because I received a temporary order on my way here, saying that there was a shortage of manpower to raid a place. That place is a leather warehouse. There were a dozen people hiding in it, and they seemed to be plotting something. When we attacked, they also resisted. One of them was very powerful with a knife. 3 of us died. The rest of them thought they could avoid death if they surrendered. They were really naive. Finally, Major asked me to execute all of them." Hearing this, Fang Linian suddenly understood the reason why Lieutenant Lucan was covered in blood. Lieutenant Lucan finished smoking the cigarette quickly. He threw the cigarette butt on the ground very irritably, then he crushed it with his foot. He said to Fang Linian word by word, "Although those people are similar to ordinary people in their clothes and dressings, they have a very strange temperament, you know? A temperament that is incompatible with us and even the entire Yangfan city. And you, although you cover it well, but you also have the same temperament as them. Lieutenant Lucan was right. Contestants lived in another world. The education, living environment, ways of speaking, and behaviors that contestants had received since childhood were definitely different from those of locals. If you pay attention to it, you can definitely feel it. Fang Linian should be terrified when he heard these words, but at this time, he had calmed down after a few minutes of foreshadowing. Is Lieutenant Lucan really going to kill me? Why would he waste so much time and effort talking nonsense? He could have just shot him. From another perspective, what could Lieutenant Lucan get if he killed Fang Linian? He killed so many people before and didn't get any benefits. Would he get a lot of money if he killed Fang Linian? More importantly, killing Fang Linian, on the contrary, lost a skilled mechanic, his own interests would be damaged. Hans must have made it very clear that this modified car was pieced together, so there was a high probability that it would break down on the road. If without Fang Linian, the odds of getting a team wipe would be increased by 10%. People in this world were just looking for fame and fortune. After understanding this point, Fang Linian of course made his mind clear. Now the key was to give Lieutenant Lucan a way out, then it would be enough to lure him with profit. Therefore, he immediately smiled innocently. Boss! I really don't know what you are talking about. Didn't I tell you all about my origins? I have been running around and doing things wholeheartedly under everyone's eyes. How can I have the thought of making trouble? Furthermore, if I really am a spy, I have already gained your trust during the day, why would I take the risk by going for the mission with you? Lieutenant Lucan heard Fang Linian's words and squinted at him. Yes, then why are you doing this?